Bond. James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
For your eyes only, darling.
I never joke about my word 007.
For England, James?
Come in, Univex. James Bond here.
Am I going to have a problem with you, Bond?
Allow me to introduce myself.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
No, you're cleverer than you look.
Still better than looking cleverer than you are.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
007 reporting for duty.
Hello! The name's Berkeley, Ziggy Berkeley, from Cinema on the Rocks. And with me is Eric Dewey from Socially Awkward Studios. And you are listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. That's right, this is the show where we talk about bondage, James Bondage. And today we're going to be talking about bondage in the car.
Oh, yeah. That's right, we're going to wrap you up, tie you up, throw you in the boot, and take you for a ride today.
Or perhaps we're only going to make you think we're going to do that, but actually we're going to stuff you in a pig, make you feel like borscht, and, you know, that kind of thing.
Send you straight across the border. All right.
While we make the other agents feel foolish.
Dum 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 dum.
Yes, let's all give a hand to the Living Daylights plot, ladies and gentlemen. No, this is, we're going to be talking about the cars of 007. And back when we had our contest just before Spectre, where we asked what list you wanted us to redo first, when I placed a silent bet with myself, this is the list I thought you were all going to say. And you know how many votes for this list we got?
0. Oh, I was way off.
Yeah, none, not a one, which really, really surprised me because when we did the list the first time, personally, looking back, I think it was kind of half-assed because it was actually half-sized. And I thought that the cars of 007, being as iconic to the films as they are, really deserved an episode of their own. So it's one I really, really wanted to get back to. So now that we've had a little time in between our first run at it and this one, we've had another movie come out. Seemed like as good a time as any. And we also had something else come out, a handy reference guide. Eric, tell them about the handy reference guide.
Oh, indeed. What we have here is James Bond Cars by Frederick Brun, maybe? I don't know. Yes, a fantastic book, just released fairly recently. It was in November of last year, same month as Spectre, correct?
Yes, just in time for Spectre, just a couple weeks after.
In time, yes. Fantastic book. Lots of great pictures of the various vehicles that we have seen throughout the Bond movies. Lots of back information on the vehicles, and not just the ones that were in the films too. A lot of stuff that led up to the ones in the films. A lot of background information. I haven't actually read every word of this book yet. I've more flipped through it for the purposes of this episode. So I was mostly looking at pictures and the captions thereof. However, I did read bits and pieces, and I look forward to going back through and actually just reading it from start to finish. And one great feature of this book that I've noticed there at the end, they do have a filmography section where they have a little blurb of information from all of the movies, including one of the posters, which is just kind of cool. They've got the movie, the year it came out, a picture of one of the posters, the director who wrote the music, the actor who played Bond, and the main car listed.
The actor who played the main car?
Yes, the actor who played the main car. It's very important. You know what I mean. You know what I meant to say anyways. But yeah, it's I didn't expect that at the back of the book, and I thought that was a really cool addition to have that kind of there.
Yeah, it's a very, very cool collection. I would personally recommend it not just for Bond fans, but if you know someone who's just into cars and not necessarily a Bond fan, it's still worth it for them. Me personally, I'm much more of a Bond person than I am a car person, but just really great no matter which end of the spectrum you're coming from. It's great if you just want to open it up and stare at the pictures, or if you're there to read it for the articles, you can also read it for the articles, and they're very well written. Like Eric, I didn't quite read it cover to cover, but I did read enough full sections to be confident in saying that it's a good read. There's interesting stuff in there, so well worth it for the Bond fan, and actually not unreasonably priced for a hardcover.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, if you would like to pick the book up after we're done with this episode, you can go to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast website, which is hermajestiespod.com, and go to the section for this episode, and we will have a link where you can purchase the book from Amazon. We do ask if you could please go through that link, because if you do that, then at no additional charge to you, we will see a small cut of that, and that lets us keep bringing you this show for free.
Absolutely.
So, please.
I'll even throw a specific link to this book up in the episode description when I post this episode. So there'll be a specific link that'll take you right to this book. And then you can, of course, continue to shop on Amazon if you want something else, like a certain DVD that or Blu-ray that just happened to be released today, I believe.
Yes, Spectre
the day
just
we're
came
recording
out,
anyway,
so...
not the day you're listening to this, but
yeah, the day we're recording it. So hey, now you know how far ahead we are. So yeah,
which is to say, not that far.
Yeah, so if you want to pick that up, great. If there is an entire house full of furniture you would like to pick up while you're there, we're happy to take a little cut of that too. Like I said, doing those things helps keep this show free for you. So there you go.
Do it.
Yes. And but in all seriousness, even if you just want to have a look at this book while you're sitting in the Barnes & Noble and have no intention of buying it, or at the library, whatever, it is definitely worth looking at this book. It's really cool stuff.
It's very nicely done, very well put together, and very interesting to look at, even if you don't read it.
Yes, and again, we decided to use that as our reference guide for this episode. We pretty much stuck to it, not 100%, but pretty close.
That is true. I have one on my list that I don't believe appears in this book at all. Now, you might end up correcting me. You might end up telling me where you found this book, where you found this car in this book, but I didn't see it, nor did I see a reference to it, which really actually surprised me. There were a couple of more that there was one that we had thought was missed that I later found just because they chose to use a different picture. They didn't actually use one from the movie. They just kind of mentioned it and showed a different picture.
And it's not in the official listing either.
Yeah, and this one, that one's not. I don't know if it made your list. It did not make my list. So.
And just to make things clear for our regular audience members who think, what, you guys cheated? No, we did not cheat. We were establishing guidelines as far as what counts for the list that we're going to do. And hey, we should tell them what list we're doing, shouldn't we? It is our top 25 cars from the 007 movies and from Never Say Never Again. We use Frederick Brunn's James Bond cars as a reference guide, but we can choose something from one of the films that isn't in the book if we didn't find it. Or if one of us found it, the other one didn't. Hey, if it was in a movie, it's all good.
We'll figure it out.
Yes. So we are doing a top 25 James Bond cars, and what our discussion was is, what is a car? So
I think we
thought about
settled
it.
on a rectangular or a four-cornered land-based vehicle. I think
that said, trains
on.
Don't count. Its primary function has to be the land vehicle, so we're not going to mention the gondola from Moonraker. Sorry, folks. I love that thing. And, of course, since it does have to be a land vehicle, the little plane from Octopussy. What movie was that again, Eric?
The Little Nelly?
No, the little plane from Octopussy. What movie was it? Your favorite movie to talk
Octopussy.
about? Yeah,
well, you said that already.
I did. I was inviting you to say it again because I know it's your favorite word.
Well, Octopussy is a fun word to say because it has both octo and pussy in it. And Octopussy, I mean, I feel we should say it at least 8 times per episode for obvious reasons.
I see. So that would be Octopussy galore, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Bad jokes aside.
Very.
Yeah. We did also decide that certain types of land vehicle would also be acceptable, and that includes motorcycles.
Okay. Now, I will spoil just a little bit and say I personally did not include any motorcycles, mostly because I'm just not a huge motorcycle fan personally, and so none of them caught my eye enough to be like, oh, I need this one on my list. There was only one that potentially could have made the list that I thought about possibly putting in there, and that was more due to what happened on the bike in that particular scene rather than the bike itself, and so just ultimately I found 25 cars that I liked better. But that's not to say that motorcycles were out of consideration. It's just that I personally didn't end up choosing any.
Spoiler alert. Thanks, Eric.
Sorry.
No, so our discussions got a little more detailed because we had to decide what counted and what didn't. But at the end of the day, we have 25 cars, in air quotes, from James Bond movies, and we did not have a restriction as to whether or not, we have to pick one from every film. So some films are probably not going to be mentioned. So there you go.
Oh, yeah.
And then after the list, we have a special surprise for you. This is kind of fun, and we'll leave it at that. So with that said, who would like to start with the top 25 James Bond cars?
All right. I think you started the last list, if I'm not mistaken, or did I start?
It's hard to tell anymore.
Well, I'll tell you what. Flip a coin. I won. Yay. I'll go.
All right. So, Eric, what is your number 25 James Bond car?
All right. At number 25, I took one that was not actually. This is the bottom of the list, by the way, guys. That does not mean that these are not cool cars, because this was just our top 25 favorites. We did not have a bottom list on this one. So that being said, we do have some that aren't necessarily as cool as others, but still meritorious of being on this list. And therefore, for my number 25, I have one that was not actually Bond's car, but it was very cool, especially for its time, and it was very cool to see in a Bond film. And the girl driving it was gorgeous, which never hurts at all. So I went with the Ford Mustang from Goldfinger. That was Miss Masterson's car.
Interesting selection. I will refrain from comment because we will be talking about that later.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Good choice. Good choice. So then for my number 25, the car itself is cool enough that I did have to include it on the list. I couldn't justify not including it because it is a damn cool car, which was absolutely ruined.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yes, this is the one car that was absolutely ruined by Q. Or R, or whatever the hell you want to call him. We all know where this is going, folks. From Die Another Day, the Aston Martin Vanquish, also known as
the Vanish.
And my short note for this car is I have no respect for the invisible bullshit. Because that to me is... I mean, Die Another Day, we've talked about extensively about just what an abomination it is. Unless you're watching it under Ning Shin's theory, in which case it's just mind-blowing. However, what would still be an abomination, and what definitely proves that this has to be a hallucination, that this cannot possibly be real, something that it's the thing I can't take seriously in any Bond movie. I could take everything that happened in Moonraker seriously if I have to. I can take the Zomji lasers, the space station. I can take Jaws-on-Jaws action from The Spy Who Loved Me seriously. But I can't take an invisible car. I just can't.
My biggest problem with the invisibility was that it was perfect invisibility when it needed to be. But when they wanted us to know where the car was, they made it very obvious that you could still see its tracks in the snow, and there was a slight shimmer that was exactly car-shaped. I'm like, what's the point at this point? And
they
I
might as well have just made
okay.
it click like the Predator.
Probably would have been better.
Probably would have. Now, if there would have been like an HUD with Predator vision, I would have been a little more okay with it, but it still would have sucked. And of course, the one other point that speaks to exactly what you said about the wandering imperfection of the invisibility is when R first demonstrates it. As he walks around the car, it looks like he's doing a silly walk from Monty Python. Why would we have John Cleese doing that? I don't know. So simply because I cannot give it any respect, even though if it had just been parked in the lot and Bond drove it and nothing else happened, it would have been higher on the list because it's a damn cool car. The Aston Martin Vanquish from Die Another Day.
It was a very cool car, and despite the invisibility part of it, I pretty much agree with everything that you said, actually, because that is pretty much the only part that was bad about it. I will say that one did make my list. Not much higher, though, so it's not like it's, oh my gosh, you've cracked my top 10. No, nothing like that, not even close. But it did make it just slightly higher on my list.
Fair enough.
So what do you have then at number 24?
At number 24 is a car that at first I thought was not in the book at all. However, it is mentioned in the text. So, and I was kind of surprised because of all the cars that one would expect to be mentioned. And in fact, Brun makes big mention of another car from this movie that appeared afterwards that Bond drove that wasn't actually his to begin with, that he pretty much appropriated. And yet he doesn't make mention of the first car Bond ever drove. And that is not a Lotus, not an Aston Martin, not a Bentley, not a Jaguar. No, it was a Chevrolet Bel Air, which he appropriated from somebody who really had a problem with cigarettes. So for the place of honor as the first car that Bond ever drove in a movie, I have chosen the Chevrolet Bel Air. I don't remember if it was a 61 or not, from Dr. No as my number 24.
All right. I will admit that one escaped my notice. That one was not the one that I was thinking of that I didn't see in the book. So I'm really beginning to think I just missed the page because I'm really almost 100%
I had to dig for it, honestly.
So, yeah, it's quite possible that I just missed the one that I was thinking of. This one, yeah, it did escape my notice because nothing really, I mean, yeah, it was the first car I drove, but nothing really spectacular happened in it, so it didn't stick in my memory quite as much. But good choice. I like that.
All right. So what do you have at number 24, sir?
Now, you said specifically that trains were not allowed on this list. However, you didn't say anything about cars that drove on the train tracks. And so at my number 24 is the Mercedes-Benz 280S from Octopussy, one of my favorite movies to say. Octopussy, I'm sorry, did you not hear that? Octopussy is the movie I'm talking about. This was just a great fun scene with the car on the train tracks. Completely unrealistic since obviously most cars are not going to have the same exact width as a set of train tracks. That's just silly, but a fun scene nonetheless and a fun car. A nice car, and I liked seeing it used in that way. So for me, number 24 is the Mercedes 280S from Octopussy.
All right. Interesting choice. I like it. I will say that is the only time we will be discussing it on this list, but I can't fault you for it at all. And do you know how trains got their gauge? How the distance between the rails was standardized?
I do not. How is that?
Based on the average width of a cart on a Roman road.
Huh. As one does.
As one does.
I guess.
You just can't escape Caesar, man. You just can't.
That guy, I swear.
So you think he ruled the world or something, or at least part of it.
Ooh, zing.
So what do you have at number 23, sir?
At number 23, and this one vexed me a little bit. In fact, even looking at my list right now, I'm almost tempted to move it up a little bit. But looking at the cars above it, we're really getting into the cars I really, really like. And this one is definitely no exception. And if anything, I think this could easily swap places. I think the next three on my list are really pretty much a tie at this point. My 23 through 21, maybe even my 20, they're all pretty equal. These could flip-flop throughout any of these. But what I actually ended up putting on my list at number 23 is a car that we got to see roll over and roll over and roll over and roll over some more. The Aston Martin DBS from Casino Royale.
All right. I'm surprised, sir.
Really? That it's this low or that it's on the list
yes,
at all? Okay.
That it's that low.
Like, but it's not. It's a good car. Yeah.
It's a good car.
I said, this could easily be number 20. I could easily flip flop these. Like I said, my 23 through 20 are pretty equally tied. They're all just very cool. I think maybe the only reason that it got down on the list compared to the other ones was that I do like my gadgets, and there wasn't a whole lot of gadgetry in the DBS, which was on purpose. I mean, it wouldn't have fit with the rest of the movie for this one to have a bunch of gadgets. It had what it needed, but yeah, it would have been odd to see in such a serious retelling of the Bond story where they're trying to keep things in a much more realistic light to be like, oh, this one has an ejector seat and invisibility. That would have sucked. But when just ranking the cars specifically, it does have an impact on how I feel about them. So maybe that's why this one ended up at 23 instead of 22 or 21 or 20. But there's just so many other cool cars that we get to talk about that I couldn't let Aston Martin completely dominate this list, even though it pretty much does.
Fair enough. So that brings up a point, actually, that I noticed while I was doing this list, and it's working on this list actually for me produced the result that I usually hope that our episodes are producing for our audience, and that's that it made me rethink the topic in a way that I hadn't thought of it for. Because originally my idea of a Bond car is A, it's Bond's car, and B, gadgets. It's all about the gadgets. It's a combination of the gadgets and the sexy car that's in them. I mean, this is this is my original idea of this is what makes a Bond car. So I thought it was going to be this list was going to be dominated by the Bond gadget cars, and anything else I would have a hard time placing up. But that just didn't turn out to be that way. And as we go through this list, you're going to find that there are long droughts that don't fit into that mold. And it made me really rethink what a Bond car is. And I decided that it's just something that you can express bondinessosity with a car in a lot of ways. Maybe it's the gadget. Maybe it's just how sexy the car is. Or maybe that there's something in the history of the car which, if you're not a Bond fan, you'll look at it and just say, cool car. But if you're a dyed-in-the-wool Bond fan, like I think most of us are, after all, you're listening to a James Bond podcast, then...
Somewhere out there, somebody is listening and going, wait, this is about James... What am I doing? To you, sir? Hello.
Yeah. Guess what? Bondage is just a joke. Anyway.
So I'm just imagining some dude sitting in his basement with like a pile of ropes and like 4 rolls of duct tape listening to us going, okay, now about the bondage. What about the... These guys are talking about cars. Well, I just don't... I can't even right now.
Hi, Le Chiffre. Glad you're listening. No, but it really made me reimagine the concept of the Bond car, and my idea of what a Bond car is has expanded. So so you'll notice that as we go through my interpretation of the list, I'll be interesting to see if Eric has followed suit or not.
I can think of at least one that's on my list because of that, and it's fairly high up on the list. That in the actual movie that in which we see the car, it's not really anything that special. But in the lore of the Bond universe, it's very special. So we'll see if that continues to hold true.
All right. Now, with that said, for my number 23, we have something that I already know is not on Eric's list, and it's absolutely not in the book because the book only covers the official Eon Productions films, and it just wouldn't be a list without a mention of Never Say Never Again, Eric's favorite movie.
I think it could have been. It could have been a list without it. I'm just saying.
Well, yeah, we have actually done one without it, but for the most part, our lists have all of them. So this is one of those where it actually has a couple of modifications, but it's not really all out super gadgetized or anything. And what really strikes me about this particular vehicle is just the fact that Bond is riding it. And by saying riding it, I am, of course, revealing that it is not, in fact, a car, so to speak. But since they're allowed, I am choosing the Yamaha XJ650 Sika Turbo motorcycle from Never Say Never Again because, as I stated in my notes, Connery on a crotch rocket.
I think that was the same note you gave when we were talking about the chase scenes, and that particular scene came up.
Yes, because Connery on a crotch rocket.
Crotch rocket.
How cool is that?
It's pretty cool, I'm not going to lie.
And the thing is, honestly, out of all the Bonds, he's the one that I would actually picture more on an old, gritty, almost German World War II motorcycle, like an old German BMW or maybe a British Triumph. But no, Connery, and not just any Connery, old man Connery on a crotch rocket.
Connery.
It's
old Connery on a crotch rocket. Ew.
That just to me is awesome. So I always smile when I think of that. It's one of the main points to smile about Never Say Never Again. So because I think of that so fondly, I had to include the Yamaha XJ650 Sika Turbo motorcycle from Never Say Never Again at my number 23 spot. Not too high, but definitely worth mentioning.
All right. Fair enough. Yeah, I'm not going to question your judgment. Like I said, I did skip over motorcycles in general, and I will admit that I don't have Never Say Never Again on this particular list. I think I've got a pretty good range. But definitely, I do believe that I don't have one for everything, and definitely not one from Never Say Never Again, so definitely not everything.
Yep, I definitely don't have something from everything.
Definitely not.
But at my number 22 spot, I do have something from two things. And this is one of those vehicles where doesn't have any gadgets, doesn't need any gadgets. It is a very, very sexy car.
Uh-huh.
Now,
I think I might know where you're going with this, but we'll see.
In terms of whose personality this fits, even though this car does not belong to this character, if I had to fit it to a Bond personality, it would be more like M is who I would really picture with a car like this. And of course, never driving it himself. However, this car, this very special car, which appeared just in the background in a parking lot in Thunderball, and then appeared much more prominently, in fact, in a very funny scene and several thereafter, in A View to a Kill, has a very special place in Bond history for those who understand that the car specifically the Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud II that was driven by Sir Godfrey Tibbett when he took James Bond to Max Zorin's chateau for the horse showing, in fact belonged to Cubby Broccoli.
Yeah.
That was his personal car, which I did not know until I read this book by Frederick Bruns. So that is a cool piece of information.
Huh.
And that makes this car so much more awesome. And knowing that, I had to include it somewhere on this list because that's just wonderful James Bond history. Plus, the scenes with Tibbett as the chauffeur were hilarious, especially tell me you're taking the car wash. I mean, that's awesome.
I will admit this one was on my list originally. It did get bumped off. This, if we were doing a top 26, this would have been my number 26 for sure. It was in there, but it just barely missed the cut for this one. And I think what it came down to was that my biggest reason for including it was the fact that it was Cubby Broccoli's car, and then other things seemed to outweigh that. Now, looking back, I can totally see including it for that reason. So no question judgment. I almost wish I had kept it on my list as well.
Well, now you can drown in your sorrows and regrets and tell everyone what your number 22 is, sir.
My number 22 and 21 are a combo, so I'll just list them back to back right now. The order in which these are, like I already said, my 23 through 20 are pretty much equal. These two more so than most. And any given minute, they could easily flip-flop from the 22 to 21. As I have it currently, my number 22 is the Jaguar XKR. And the number 21 is the Aston Martin Vanish, both from Die Another Day. I often say the best thing about that film was the fact that we did get to see a supercar versus supercar fight, and that was made possible by these two cars. So I really feel they're very equal in my estimation, simply because I like the fact that the Aston Martin has the high-tech super spy gadgets, the stealth, even though it sucked, but the fact that it has stealth as opposed to more offensive power. And the bad guy's vehicle is just, well, I've got some guns here, and then those guns have some guns, and those guns have guns, and then in case that doesn't work, I got some missiles too. I like the fact that they put some thought into that. They didn't just give it the same treatment as like, okay, we're going to give it the same gadgets that a Bond car would have. If you think about it, the majority of Bond's gadgets are defensive, as we would expect from the quote-unquote good guy in the film. Yes, some of his cars have had guns and rockets and things as well, and he's almost always used them to get out of somewhere or to get something, not necessarily to kill. Whereas the bad guy, he's going to come out all guns blazing, rockets and missiles and machine guns and everything else. And I thought that was a fantastic use of these two vehicles. Plus, they're just, like you said, darn sexy vehicles. So, from Die Another Day, my number 22 and 21, the Jaguar and the Aston Martin Vanquish/Vanish.
I question your judgment, sir.
For which one? You only had it at 25. That's not too far off on the Aston Martin, but did you have the Jaguar much higher or just not on the list at all?
I just question your judgment, sir.
Oh, all right. We'll see if we find out later. Okay. Well, then, go ahead and let's hear your 21 then.
My number 21 is a vehicle which, again, if you're not... It's along the same lines as my number 22, in that if you're not really into James Bond and the history, in fact, this car more so than the Silver Cloud, because at least the Silver Cloud saw some real action when he got to A View to a Kill. Whereas... my number 21 never moved, at least not on film. However, the Bentley convertible from Russia with Love is the car from the Ian Fleming's 007.
Indeed.
The Bentley was Bond's car in the books. And not only that, but the phone that you see in the car is the first Bond gadget in a car. So you have two pieces of great James Bond history. And even though you don't really get a full-on view of the car, you never see him really driving it, still, that bit of history, the combination of the fact that the Bentley convertible was James Bond's go-to ride in the books, and that the radio telephone inside the car is the first Bond car gadget in the movies, that means I had to put the Bentley convertible from Russia with Love somewhere on this list. And I think 21 was a pretty respectable spot to put it.
Well, I just don't know that I can completely agree with that. I'm going to have to, if not question your judgment, I am giving you a funny look from the side of my face right now. That's all I'm going to say.
you're a Picasso.
Exactly. That's kind of how it goes, right?
Fair enough. Now, with that said, at my number 20 spot, I have one that you have already mentioned, which I think means you already know what I'm going to say. And that is a car that first appeared in the movie because of a compromise. Because when the production team for Goldfinger went to the Ford Motor Company and they said, we want to take your signature Lincoln Continental and we want to destroy it at a junkyard. They said, hey, that's not nice. Could you at least promote our brand new car that we're first introducing this year in your film? And they said, sure, which is why Goldfinger is the first time you will ever see a Ford Mustang in a motion picture. And so, as the first Ford Mustang ever to appear in a motion picture, and look very nice doing it, I'm choosing Miss Masterson's Mustang from Goldfinger as my number 20.
All right. Only a few spots off of me. I wasn't sure if this one was going to make your list because it doesn't have the gadgetry. It's not even Bond's car. But yes, the coolness factor and the fact of the history behind it, I think definitely makes it appropriate for this. So yeah, good choice.
All right. I believe that brings us to your number 20, sir.
Indeed it does. And for me, number 20 is a car that is very cool. And I really, really, really like this car. And had Bond actually been shown driving the car for any length of time in the movie, probably be much higher on this list. I still like this car. If I could get a used one at a reasonable price and the maintenance wasn't ridiculously expensive on it, I would love to own one of these cars. This is like a reasonable vehicle that if I made just maybe $10,000 more a year, I could probably afford to have one of these and maintain it.
I bet I know what it is.
Unfortunately, I don't make that extra $10,000 a year as much as I'd love to. So I can't justify owning this vehicle, but it's still really cool. However, since the majority of the driving time we saw this car, it was not under Bond's control. Actually, it was under the big, clumsy American hands of Jack Wade. It is the BMW Z3 from GoldenEye.
I am surprised it is this low on your list.
Said if they had shown Bond driving it, if they'd have given him, give me 90 more seconds of Bond driving it on the screen, and this jumps up 10 spots. This cracks the top 10. But the fact that it was so pumped up that it was even going to be in this film. It was so like.
Now, what if Xenia had been in the back seat?
We're going to talk about Xenia a little bit later. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, that would have definitely propelled it. I'm not going to lie. That would have definitely.
Oh, you mean propelled the car up the list?
It wouldn't have even needed anything but her to propel it. Like gas? Who cares about gas? Do you see how hot this thing is in the back where you got right here? It's like a nuclear reactor in this car. Who cares about gas when you're running a nuclear reactor back here? But yeah, because Bond didn't get to play with it as much as I felt he should, especially after such a big deal was made about, oh my God, Bond's not going to be driving an Aston Martin. You get BMW paid for they're just selling out to the highest bidder. Well, yeah, that's what they do. That's how Aston Martin got in there in the first place. So it's like, don't act like Bond just decided to drive Aston Martins out of the goodness of his heart. There was money involved there too, so I'm not mad at them for putting a BMW in the movie. I'm mad at them for not putting it in the movie enough.
All right. So
that's where I stand on the Z3. Beautiful car. I really like the lines of it. I thought they went a little too aggressive from the models after that, from the Z4 to Z8 and onward. I felt they lost some of the sexiness when they tried to make it a little bit more angular, which was the style of the day. And luckily, I think things are kind of going back a little bit more towards the smoother lines, which I enjoy better.
All right. So that brings us, I believe, to your number 19, sir.
For my number 19, this is a vehicle that we've both mentioned one of this vehicle on this list already. However, this one bumped higher on the list, first of all, because Bond actually drives it, and second of all, because he does a really cool stunt in it, even if maybe the stunt looks a little weird when you watch it and you go, hey, wait a minute, didn't he go into that alley on the other side of the car? But that's okay.
Vegas, baby.
For my number 19, we have the Ford Mustang once again, but this time from Diamonds Are Forever. Again, a cool car. The Mustang's always been a cool vehicle, and there's no denying that. And of course, cool car tricks are always fun, even if, as I said, it doesn't really go as planned. I believe the story that is most prevalent is that they did multiple takes of that stunt, and took the front half of the best one and the back half of the best one and put them together. And unfortunately, at that time, they had gone in. They had done it on different sides of the vehicle to try and get the take, and so you end up with this mishmash. But that withstanding, it's still fun.
Now, what's interesting about this is overall, over the course of all of our episodes, our regular listeners will remember that Eric tends to give that particular scene in Die Another Day. I am so sorry. I apologize profusely.
It's not that bad.
I'm not going to... Yeah, but I disrespected a film that I actually like a lot. No, Eric tends not to give this particular scene in Diamonds Are Forever a lot of respect. And I love this. I think it's a great Vegas baby car chase. Eric has his car on his list. I don't.
Really?
Really?
I thought for sure when I saw that one of the Mustangs was on your list that the other one had to be there too. But all right, color me surprised.
I think it's because the other one's on the list.
Okay, fair enough.
And because there were some other ones that I just really wanted to make sure I got mentioned. So
Gotcha. All right. Well, hopefully this means that more cars... I like when you list things that aren't even on my list at all, because that means our list is expanding. I mean, especially since, let's face it, anybody who's listened to the show probably can guess that both of our number ones are most likely going to be the same on this one. It's one of those few times when we can pretty much expect the number one. In this case, the rest of the list is where the meat is, because the number one's kind of, we kind of know what's coming.
Yeah, but the anticipation makes it all the more worth. And we have a special surprise afterwards. But first, we do have the rest of the list to go.
Indeed. So I believe that brings us to my number 18, or do you still...
Or my number 19.
Your number 19. There you go. That's what I was for. Yeah. I just did my number 19.
Yes, you did. Now, my number 19 and my number 18 are kind of a package deal because they're along similar lines. And these definitely fall into that mold that I was talking about earlier of the expanded idea of what a James Bond car is. And for me, even though James Bond drove neither of these vehicles, actually, I come to think of it. No, wait, he did. I think he did drive one of them very briefly. But anyway, even though these aren't really Bond cars, quote unquote, in the classic sense, they are integral parts of the films that they come from. And they also both merit the same 3-word description that I have in my notes. So the first car that I'm going to mention is at my number 19 spot, a car that at first I thought was not in the book, but Eric says he found it, and that would be a Zaporozhet's ZAZ 965A from GoldenEye. And if you're wondering what the hell is that, that's the piece of shit that Jack Wade was driving.
Yes, Jack Wade's car. Yes, I was flipping through the book and I happened to stumble across it, and I didn't recognize it at first because, like you, I was kind of skimming for the pictures at first. But they did briefly mention in the very first page of the Unexpected Ones section. So I'm turning now to page 118 in the book, and they do mention here, so sometimes life plays tricks, cars do too, usually element of surprise, blah, blah, blah. And then in GoldenEye, for example, Bond looks on inquisitively when he arrives in the Russian... I can't even talk today right now. Bond looks on inquisitively when he arrives in the Russia. I'm literally reading that from the book. In the Russia?
Well, it is translated. I mean,
okay, I was like, wait a minute, I thought I was reading that wrong, but I'm like, no.
Frederick Brun's first language is not English, so This is translated by somebody else.
I was like, at first I thought, I was like, wait, am I reading this right? Okay, so Bond looks on inquisitively when he arrives in the Russia and spots the vehicle belonging to his colleague from the CIA who has infiltrated the country. Rather than a beautiful American car or a sporty car, Jack Wade has an antique and simple ZAZ 965 from 1963. And then they show a picture of one... They actually, yep, there it is. They show a picture of one like brand new on the showroom floor. They don't show Jack Wade's car. They show a black and white picture of one brand new from the showroom floor.
Yeah, and that is definitely not the condition of Jack Wade's car. And that's, to me, what's so cool about this car, because it breaks down and you have James Bond, stiff-ass Brit, just standing there all dapper, and you have Buford Pusser saying, "Give me the sledge," so he can hit the engine with a hammer to make it work again.
As one does.
That's just my note for this car is it's just hilarious. And it's such a memorable part of GoldenEye that I had to include it, because you have just a really memorable scene, a fun scene, as much fun as you can have with Jack Wade anyway. and it's centered around the car, and I had to give that some respect because I do love it. So there you go, the Zephorajets ZAZ 965A from GoldenEye, because it's just hilarious at my number 19.
All right. I will admit that one did not make my list, but indeed it was a fun little bit of that movie. I mean, one of the reasons that I like that movie so much is that it does have those fun little bits in it. So no question judgment. And I'm glad it was in the book, even if it wasn't pictured exactly as it was in the film.
Now, at my number 18, I already spoiled that it carries the same note. It's just hilarious. And this is a vehicle which Bond himself did not drive, but he did sit in the passenger seat during one of my favorite chase scenes from the 80s. And you have some very memorable moments happening here, including easy come, easy go. And I am referring to the tuk-tuk, or which I like to think of as a mini-moke, even though I know it's not. Basically, the little Indian taxi cab that Vijay was driving Bond through as he was being chased by Gobinda and his thugs through the streets of India.
Oh, yes. I briefly thought about putting that one on there, and then I kind of threw it into the same category as the chariot type deals. Even though it is self-powered, it does count. I'm not discounting it, but I didn't put it on my list because I kind of lumped it into that same group mentally.
Fair enough. I mean, let's face it, outside of a retirement community in Florida, it's not something that you would really expect on a street that wasn't so loaded with people you couldn't go above 20 miles an hour except in a Bond movie anyway. But it's just, that chase scene is so cool, and I love it when it pops a wheelie. So, my number 18 from Octopussy, Tuk Tuk.
All right. Well, anything from Octopussy is okay by me, so I will allow it.
All right. So what
I know you're waiting
for
for my
18,
permission, so...
I was.
All right. For me, for number 18, this is a vehicle that it's on my list, and it's this high on my list because of its reappearance fairly recently. Even though it wasn't the exact same year, it was similar enough to give us throwbacks to a couple of different films. And what we thought originally was a throwback to one film actually appears to be a throwback to a different film more specifically, which is very interesting, but it still gives you that same nostalgic feeling.
And and I know what you're talking about. I'll let you go.
Sorry. So for me, for number 18, I went with the Rolls-Royce Silver Wraith. You can take your pick, either the 1958 that was featured in From Russia with Love, or the 1948 that we saw in Spectre.
All right. And as it turns out, and I had forgotten this wasn't Goldfinger's car, it was M's car.
Indeed. In From Russia with Love, it was M's car, yes. The 58. But that would explain, again, it was curious. When we were originally watching Spectre, we both thought, like, when he looks at it, and he smiles and says, it's a 1948 Rolls-Royce Silver Wraith. And so we're like, okay, so he knows this car. And immediately our thoughts went back to Goldfinger. Which wasn't even a Silver Wraith, but it was a Rolls Royce, but it more closely matches the vehicle that M rode in From Russia with Love, which was the 58 Silver Wraith. Now, granted, some of those old Rolls Royces, they do have very similar stylings to them. I mean, there wasn't a huge difference between the different body types. You had to know exactly what you were looking for to know the difference, but we knew it had to harken back to something because he recognized it, and obviously recognized it with some sort of fondness. So I think that he was...
Not just fondness, James fondness.
Are we going to start a show about fondling? Bondling? No, that doesn't work. But yeah, so...
Gregory.
It's Connor Egg. Gregory sounds like something, that happens that we don't talk about in all boys' schools. Gregory sounds just weird and dirty, but Connor Egg, that sounds like a nice single malt scotch, probably old enough to order its own scotch. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with Connor Egg. But for my number 18, we do have the Rolls-Royce Silver Wraith, and you can take your pick of year between 48 and 58 on that.
All right. So that brings us to your number 17, sir.
Moving on to number 17, I have a car that, again, was not driven by Bond, although he did ride in it. This one makes the list and even gets pushed up a bit on the list because of its specialness. This was a vehicle that was not actually made. This is not a production vehicle, and not due to any specific gadgets or anything that were put into it, but just because of the fact that it was a special vehicle made for this film by one of these shops that does customizations to vehicles. So this is not a vehicle that you could walk into a Range Rover dealership and be like, hey, let me get that convertible model y'all had in Moonraker. They didn't make it. It had to be specially made. But that scene at the beginning of Moonraker is so fantastic and so depends on a convertible vehicle, and especially a convertible vehicle that would feel at home in a military type installation. So the Range Rover convertible, specially made for Moonraker, makes my number 17.
All right. Good choice. Good choice. I will say it is not on my list, but not going to question your judgment. Now, that said, I'm going to kind of question my judgment on my number 17.
All right.
Because on the one hand,
why it's on the list at all, or questioning how low?
High it is.
How high? Okay.
And admittedly, this is a car that I didn't think would ever make my list because it's not sexy. It's clumsy as hell. On the other hand, there's just an undeniable Bondy necessity about it, even though it is not James Bond's car. In fact, in the scene where we are introduced to this vehicle, when Bond is driving, his car does something incredibly unspeakable, which is why that car is not going to be on the list, because we have no room for frickin' slide whistles on this list. But we do have room for is a flying car. So, from the Man with the Golden Gun, at number 17, the AMC Matador, driven by Scaramanga, featuring Mary Goodnight in the trunk, where she can stay, because it's a flying car. Because flying car. It's unwieldy, it doesn't convert, so it's not like James Bond Jr.'s car, but if you have time and a barn that you can store the wings in,
of course, you
have a flying car. And there's just something that has to be said for that. So my number 17, Scaramanga's AMC Matador with the flying car option.
All right. I cannot question your judgment, neither for its placement or its inclusion on the list. I'll just say we'll bring that up again soon, probably.
All right. Now at number 16, it's interesting that you just brought up the thing with the Silver Wraith, because you're pointing out a mistake that we made in the show. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should own up to those things. But I'm now about to point out a mistake that I make on the show. In fact, I've made it several times. At least 3, if not 4 different episodes worth of times, I have made this mistake. And I hope most of you understand. I know Eric knows this. I hate making mistakes on the podcast. I mean, I really try hard not to do that. I do lots of research. I try to make sure I'm on my game. I've got all my facts straight. If I know that everybody's going to make at least one mistake during the course of a show as long as ours, especially one that you really don't go back and edit. Surprise, folks, we don't. But
very minimal editing goes into this show. That is correct.
But still, I pride myself on reaching for 0 as often as possible. And whenever I make a mistake and I catch it, I absolutely cringe. In fact, there's one episode where I kept making the same mistake over and over and over again that I kind of want to go back and burn. But that has nothing to do with the cars. Now, this mistake, I didn't even know I was making until I read James Bond Cars by Frederick Brunton. So I apologize for making this mistake, but I will defend myself.
All right.
Because, for one thing, and this is a car that Bond himself doesn't drive. In this, well, let me rephrase that. He doesn't drive in its most important scenes. He drives it very, very briefly, but not in its most important scene.
All right.
And it's a car which I love the scene that it's in, and the scene that it's in is so much better because he's not driving. Instead, he's just sitting there crapping his pants while Tracy is going around an ice rink in a demo, in what basically ends up becoming a demo derby. It was supposed to be an ice derby, but she makes it a demo derby. And he's just sitting there, oh my God, I'm just going to kiss her quick and then crap my pants again. She calls the car a Big M, and it looks like a Mustang. Now, with that said, the 1969 Mercury Cougar is, in fact, a rebranded Mustang.
Yes.
It is the same damn car.
Indeed.
But I've been calling it a Mustang for the entire run of Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. And so I keep making a mistake. I'm sorry, folks. So at
And
number
you should be.
16,
No, I'm just kidding.
the Mercury Cougar, driven by Tracy DiVincenzo in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, her Big M.
All right. I will say that that one it did not make my list. However, it is on the short list of things that were almost on the list. And I will say that I wasn't shocked to see there was a Mercury Cougar, but at the same time, Mercury and Ford are the same company. They put out the same cars branded under different things. When I was growing up, my parents had a Mercury Lynx, which was a Ford Escort. It was just branded as a Mercury Lynx for inexplicable reasons. Right now, I drive a Chrysler Cirrus, which is a Dodge Stratus. That's what it is. Whether you want to call it a Chrysler or a Dodge, it doesn't matter. That's what it is. So the mistake is not really unexpected, because let's face it, that's what they want. They're the same car, just put out under different brands, because some people are so brand conscious and so brand loyal that they'd be like, oh, I really like that Mustang, but you know what? I love my Mercurys. I'm not going to buy anything but a Mercury. Well, here you go. Here's your Mercury Cougar. So, yeah, technically a mistake, but not one I'm going to hold against you.
Thank you. So apparently, and you notice, Bond wasn't chasing a cougar. Bond was inside the cougar.
Which can be said about a lot of these films. But no. All right. Like I said, didn't make my list, but did make my short.
I believe.
All right, my number 16. This is a fun one. This one could end up bumping down further on the list, and if I were to redo this list tomorrow, it might get lower on the list. But I don't see this one ever bumping off the list. This is another vehicle that Bond never drove, never rode in. This was a bad guy's car, but it was so damn cool. And again, the fact that it was essentially made for this film. This was not a production vehicle. This was a film. This was a car that was put together specifically for this film because they wanted a pimp mobile. And so my number 16 is the pimp mobile, the Chevy Corvette Corvado Dunham C3 from Live and Let Die. This is a car that never should have been, but yet I'm so glad that it is.
Right on.
It's very easy to follow, too. But not as easy as Bond, because he's like following a cue ball.
I can dig it, Honky. And that's all I'll say about that for the moment.
All right. Jumping up to number 15, it's one you just mentioned, Mr. Scaramanga's AMC Matador that converts into a plane. I almost didn't include this on the list because you're like, no planes, just cars. But I'm like, you know what? It was a car and then just attached to wings. So it's a car. And it deserves to be on this list. And it deserves to be on this list fairly high up. I mean, we're getting to the midpoint of this. No, it's not a fancy, sexy car, but it's just so damn cool. Probably one of the cooler things about this movie. So definitely can't question your judgment at 17 because I have it right there at number 15, the AMC Matador from The Man with the Golden Gun.
But you know what would have made it even cooler and actually probably fit the film perfectly well? If Nick Nack, after they had converted the car, pointed to it and said, "The plane! The plane!"
No. Just no. Oh, man. When worlds collide.
Ah, yeah. Now, that brings us to my number 15.
Indeed.
And my number 15 is a car that I thought you were just going to mention a few moments ago. Because it's not Bond's car, and it's not even a production car. It was made specifically for the film that it's in. But it's just such a cool car. In fact, my description for this car is, does nothing but go fast and look sexy. I'm okay with this. And I am referring to the Jaguar CX-75, driven by Mr. Hinks in Spectre.
You have that at 15?
I have that at 15.
All right. We're so close.
It's a gorgeous car. It is sexy as hell. It has no gadgets, and it's not Bond's car. So that kind of tempered it down a bit, but oh my god, it's such a hot car. And it just oozes Bondinosity. So I couldn't not have it on the list. And I couldn't have it any lower than it is. But there was just so much other stuff I had to put higher that I basically settled on at number 15. Mr. Hinks's Jaguar CX-75 from Spectre.
All right. Fair enough.
Digging the color, too.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful like that. That kind of rust orange. Ooh, beautiful.
Yes, in the scene where, as Dave Bautista describes it, the hero of the film, Mr. Hinks, is chasing his nemesis, James Bond.
Just a good way to look at it. If you're going to look at it, might as well. have it go that route, right?
Absolutely. Now, for my number 14, it carries the same exact note in my notes. Does nothing but go fast and look sexy. I'm okay with this. Except in the movie, it doesn't actually go fast. However, this is the one out of all of these James Bond vehicles, and now Eric knows exactly what the next words out of my mouth are and what the car is, that I have been in. I have been in this exact model, the GoldenEye promotional model BMW Z3 Roadster. Same color, everything. I happen to know someone who had one. We went to lunch. We broke the speed limit. Awesome car. And it just oozes Bondy necessity. And I agree with you that it is an absolute crime that Bond got to do next to nothing in it, got to do no one in it, and he ended up giving it to Jack Wade. Jack frickin' Wade. And like you said, after all of the hype, after, oh no, James Bond isn't going to be driving a British car at all. Now, let's look at some other British cars, shall we? The Jaguar I just mentioned, Ford Motor Company. Mm-hmm. The iconic British Mini Cooper, BMW.
Yep.
So, but yeah, this particular BMW, yeah, all it does is look pretty, but it is a Bond car from tires to windshield. So I had to put it at my number 14, and probably tainted a little bit by my personal experience with having been in a car like this exact car, and just like, I agree with you. I would love to own this car. It's just hot.
It's a beautiful car. It really is. And the fact that it's so underused in this film is, as you say, a true shame, for sure.
Indeed. Now that brings us to your number 14, sir.
For number 14 for me, I think you just mentioned it a moment ago at number 15, and that would be the Concept X75 from Jaguar that we saw in Spectre. We were just one number off on that. We're so close in the middle of the list sometimes, and we were only a couple off on the Matador, and we're only one off on the Jaguar. Yeah, it's just an absolutely fantastically beautiful car, just absolutely stunning vehicle, and Mr. Hanks puts it to good use in that chase scene in Spectre. So now that I have it on Blu-ray here, thanks to a very good friend of mine gifting it to me on release day, I will have to be watching that chase scene again in the very near future.
Woohoo! Enjoy, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That was definitely a welcome surprise to open the mailbox and be like, there's a package from Amazon. I'm like, I don't remember ordering anything from Amazon. It's roughly DVD or Blu-ray shaped. No. I open it up. Yes.
Yes.
So thank you.
You are welcome, sir.
Moving on then to number 13, jumping up one. This is a car that we did get to see Bond drive a lot. And while it may not have been as sexy as the previous vehicle that he had been given from this company, it's made up for it in, first of all, us actually seeing him drive it, whether it be actually driving it or controlling it from his cell phone in the back seat while hiding. It was still a much better use of the vehicle, even though it was very plain looking, very just standard coupe look. But I think the BMW 750 from Tomorrow Never Dies made an excellent Bond car. It had all the gadgets it needed, specifically the gadgets it needed. Who would have known that it would have had a wire cutter at the exact height that the bad guys would have chose to try to put a wire across a space to stop a car? Because people do that a lot, right? I mean, that's a normal thing to do. Like, okay, I'm going to try to stop a car. What do you guys think? Should we put up a barricade? Hey, why don't you clothesline it? Hey, good idea. All right, let's set up the clothesline. Oh, man, the car had a clothesline cutter at the exact right height. Damn it. That one ridiculousness aside, this car was fun. We had a cell phone, which at the time, the idea of a cell phone flipping open and having a full keyboard and a touchscreen inside, that's amazing. I mean, granted, a few years later, we're all carrying those exact things around in our pockets, but at the time, it was pretty damn amazing. I look back on Tomorrow Never Dies and The Saint with kind of the same, like, oh, look at that giant phone with the keyboard, which at the time was a tiny phone with a keyboard. It's very interesting to look back and see the difference. So for me, number 13, it's got to be the BMW 750 with the remote control cell phone from Tomorrow Never Dies.
Well, I can't say that I'm shocked that there is gambling at this establishment. I am shocked at your placement of this vehicle.
Really?
Really?
Well, since you haven't mentioned it yet, and we're around the same range, I'm going to assume that means you have it much higher than I
guess
do.
we'll find out, won't we?
All right. Well, then what do you indeed have at your number 14, then I think is what we're on?
13.
Oh, you're 13? Oh, never mind. I apologize. I was keeping track, but I had my screen scrolled down too far. I didn't see your 14. So yes, your number 13 is what I meant. Lucky number 13. Hit me with it.
Yes, and it's interesting that we just mentioned a line that was read by a character named Renault, because at my number 13, I have the Renault 11 from A View to a Kill. An absolutely unremarkable car, except for the part that you can absolutely beat it to death and cut it in half, and Bond can still drive it.
Exactly.
Takes a complete beating and keeps on ticking. And that's just worthy of some mention and applause. So, as...
More than 13, I would think. But, that's just me. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well. So, as a car that takes an absolute beating and still keeps on ticking...
Takes a licking and keeps on ticking. It's the Timex of cars.
It is indeed. And looks about as gorgeous, too, which is to say not much.
Functionality over form sometimes, folks.
Yes. Now that brings us to my number 12.
Indeed.
And this is a car which, on the one hand, I'm kind of surprised it made it this high up, except for the fact that it is a gorgeous car. I wish we could have seen more of it, other than quick pulling into a parking space, spending a lot of time parked, and having some interesting thing happens while it's parked, and then zipping out and rolling over and getting completely destroyed. So this is where I put the Aston Martin DBS from Casino Royale, because, yeah, Bond doesn't do much with it except save his own life with a really nifty glove compartment that has a med kit and defib in it, and that's just kind of cool, and just, it's a sexy car. It just is. And since I've had just sexy cars that did nothing on this list, this one saves his life without even moving. So that's got to be worth something, right? So, for my number 12, the Aston Martin DBS from Casino Royale.
Absolutely. No, definitely cannot question your judgment on that one. I feel it's a good choice. It's there. Like I said, I could easily put it higher on my list. In fact, even thinking about it now, I'm like, maybe it did deserve to be up over some of these other things. I mean, just that roll, for crying out loud, just that roll. That was fantastic. But ultimately, I just decided if the best thing about a car is the way it was destroyed, that doesn't necessarily speak that well for the car. But it's
my
still
note on it was,
cool.
I do like the med kit option.
That is awesome. It's definitely not a bad thing at all.
So what do you have at number 12, sir?
Number 12, I have yet another Aston Martin. You will notice that as much as we tried to make sure that Aston Martin would not dominate this list completely, it still kind of ended up doing so, because the Aston's just so damn sexy. And this one was definitely no exception. It's one that you have not mentioned yet, and I'm hoping that's just because it's yet, because I'd be very surprised if this one isn't on your list somewhere. However, I didn't think we saw enough of it to warrant much higher than spot number 12. I could theoretically squeeze this one into the top 10 if I absolutely had to, just for the pure fun factor of it. But ultimately, there were just some that I liked more. So at my number 12, we have the Aston Martin DB10, the brand new one made specifically for James Bond, Inspector.
Just because the audience expects me to say it, I question your judgment.
Well, what? Yeah, just a beautiful, beautiful car. It's designed for this film, and, the quip about it being it was meant for you from Q, that definitely propelled it a couple of spots on the list, just that by itself. Just absolutely, absolutely gorgeous. The fact that he parks it at the bottom of a river, that's unfortunate, but, life happens, I suppose.
Indeed it does. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now.
All right.
So that brings us to your number 11, sir.
So my number 11 is one that you already mentioned quite a while ago. And I think I gave you a sideways look out of my sideways face or something like that. Some Picasso mess about
Cubist.
that. And that would be the Bentley 4.5-liter convertible that we most know from Ian Fleming's novels, but that we did see in From Russia with Love. This one, yes, in the movies, it does play a bit of a backseat. Not a whole lot going on with this in the actual moment, so to speak. However, just from a Bond history standpoint, the fact that it was there, makes it fair game for this list, and therefore it had to be up high. I couldn't justify it cracking the top 10. Just barely. It was always hovering right there between 10 and 12, like right there in that range. I couldn't justify it cracking the top 10, but I definitely had to have it way higher than 21. So that Bentley 4.5 liter convertible, most noted from the books, but also in From Russia with Love, is my number 11.
All right. I'm not going to question your judgment. I do completely understand. I just figured since we didn't even actually see the whole car and it never moved was why I couldn't put it any higher, but I get it. I do get it.
It came down to the history. It came down to the history. Like, yes, the actual featuring in From Russia with Love was nothing more than a glance for those who had read the books. And honestly, the first time I had seen From Russia with Love, I didn't get it. I just thought, oh, look, it's a cool old car with a phone in it. Going back and watching it after having read the books, I'm like, holy crap, that's his Bentley. That's his car. That's Bond's personal car, not the company car. That's Bond's personal car that he's personally paid to have, the Q treatment to, yes, but not a company car, not something that he was provided by MI6. That's his car. So for me, it meant just a little bit more on the list, I guess.
I guess I'm just a heartless bastard.
That's the intention that I was trying to convey right there. I want everyone to think you're a heartless bastard. No, not at all. For me, this is why we have two hosts, folks. We want to have these lists. If we both had the exact same list, it would be a very boring list episode.
It would indeed. Yes, and this is why we have two hosts. So, hooray! I believe that brings us to my number 11.
Indeed.
And this is a car that you mentioned already.
Okay.
Not too far ago, but a ways ago.
Oh.
But like you said, it's a car that technically shouldn't exist because it's the unholy marriage of a Cadillac and a Corvette. And it has poison darts that shoot out of the side mirrors.
As one does.
The official name for it is the Chevrolet Corvette Corverado, but we all know it by the name that Felix Leiter gave it, the Pitmobile.
The Pitmobile.
From Live and Let Die. And my note simply says, because Pitmobile.
Pitmobile's got a pimp,
It's a Pitmobile. And it is a cool Pitmobile. I can dig it. I mean, right on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that is my number 11 from Live and Let Die, the Pitmobile.
All right.
All it's missing is maybe some gold flecks in the paint job. Now that brings us to cracking the top 10.
Dum, da, da, dum.
And this is a vehicle that is absolutely iconic, but you would expect that from the top 10 of this list at this point. I think there's only one out of my top... Well, no, I take that back. I think there are two out of my top 10 that wouldn't necessarily count as iconic, even though they're very, very cool, but they're very, very cool. So there you go. However, my number 10 is absolutely iconic vehicle. James Bond himself did not drive it, but he did follow it at a safe distance thanks to his Homa, and that is the Rolls-Royce Phantom 3, not a Silver Wraith, a Phantom 3 owned by Auric Goldfinger in Goldfinger.
What? What a quinky dink.
It's just a cool car, and the sequences surrounding it were very cool, where Goldfinger's like, yep, I know you're screwing with me, so just don't screw with me again. Don't do that. And, of course, we have the cool use of the Homer because that's different, interesting technology back in the day, whereas now it's find my iPhone. So, beep, 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 and let's not forget, the car is made of gold. The entire thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's how he smuggles, because he just melts the car down. That beautiful Rolls-Royce Phantom 3 gets melted down and turned into cash for gold. So, or gold for cash, as it were. So there we have it at my number 10, Goldfinger's Rolls-Royce Phantom 3.
All right. I will, again, not questioning judgment, but kind of a sideways glance is all I'll say.
All right.
So I guess it's time for me to crack my top 10.
It is indeed.
And this one, I'm not sure if this will be a surprise to you or not. This is one that, oddly enough, is not pictured in the book, although it is mentioned in the book. And this is one that, despite my lack of regard for the movie in total, I do have a very high regard for one scene in which this car does have a very big place. And it's a scene that's very emotionally charged and taken essentially directly from the books. So it's not like we can even claim that this is something that's new or just for Bond. This is something that was, or just for the movies. This is something that was taken directly from the book. And that, of course, is the death of Tracy Bond. Took place in this vehicle, and for that alone, it deserves a place on this list, even though it didn't evidently deserve a picture in the book. At least it did get mentioned, and so that would be the Aston Martin DBS Vantage from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Not the best thing to remember a car by, I suppose, but, you know, it was very emotional and definitely one of the best scenes in a movie that at least you and I personally, although others disagree, would rather forget. Can't leave this one off the list. It has to be in there.
Wow, that turned dark.
I know, right? I'm sorry.
Well, just to lighten it up, we do want to remind you that the other really cool part about that movie, chickens.
Oh, yeah.
You love chickens.
As
and now
one does.
Eric is going to question my judgment because that car is not on my list at all.
And I'm surprised. Now, that was the one that well, actually, you know, even though it's not on your list, was that the one that you were talking about that you originally thought wasn't in the book at all, but then you said, oh, I found it's mentioned but not pictured?
That was the Bel Air.
Oh, okay. Okay. So this is another one that is mentioned but not pictured.
All right.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just couldn't because... And hypocritical, I guess, based on some of the other descriptions I've given of why I voted for cars. It just didn't cross my mind to include it. And
I totally understand. I'm not going to question your judgment on that. Like I said, for me, it was one of those things that I thought about it. And what was funny was I didn't think about the car specifically. I thought about that scene. I'm like, well, obviously that took place in a car. Now, what car was that? And when I went back and looked, and like I said, it was mentioned in the book. And I was like, okay, well, for me, this has to be on the list because out of a movie full of easily forgettable scenes, that is not one of them.
no, it isn't.
So for me, it had to be on the list, and once it was on the list, it was an easy. It pretty much had to be in the top 10, but I couldn't justify being any higher than 10 specific.
Fair enough. And I totally understand your reasoning.
All right.
So that brings us to your number 9,
For
sir.
number 9, definitely lighten things up a little bit. Number 9 is another car that Bond never drove. In fact, it's only featured in the movie in a fairly short amount of time. However, it is essential in setting up several characters in this film. You get to see a little bit of the villain, although it's not the main villain, more of a hench person, so to speak. But you also get to see Bond in his natural element. Actually, not just in his natural element, but actually being reviewed, so to speak. So, of course, I'm speaking about the Ferrari F355 that Xenia Onatopp drove in GoldenEye. Whew, doggy. It's almost hard to decide which is hotter, the car or the driver.
Oh, Bull, if Xenia wasn't driving it, it would not be in your top 10. I'm calling it. I'm calling it right now.
Okay, yeah, probably not. Now, it would definitely have to make the list because there's no other Ferraris on the list. In fact, I'm not sure if there's, besides being briefly shown maybe in Gustav Graves or Colonel Moon's collections within Die Another Day, I don't know if there's ever been any other Ferraris featured in the Bond films. And I love a good Ferrari. I mean, I would never buy one personally. Even if I had that kind of money, there's other cars I would buy first. But I love looking at them. And put Famke in a cherry red Ferrari? I mean, you've just melted me like butter. It's over.
I don't think all of you smelled. Just saying.
Oh. So yeah, number 9, Ferrari F355, I'm sorry, from GoldenEye. Which oddly enough, they show a picture of a 355 in the book in yellow. They don't show the cherry red one that Xenia drive. They show a picture of a yellow one, which yellow works for some sports cars, but the Ferrari should always be red.
It's got to be red.
Right.
It has to. And really, there's no reason they couldn't have shown it red. That's one of the few points where, when I looked in the book, I was like, what?
And I'm pretty sure even that the color that Xenia was driving is probably not actually cherry red. It's probably Ferrari red. They do have a specific color of red that is unique to Ferrari. I'm sure it's only it would take a color expert with a perfect vision or more than perfect vision to tell the difference between that and cherry red, I'm sure. But technically, I believe Ferrari does own the patent on a specific color of red that they use on their vehicle. So why wouldn't the Ferrari red be shown for the only Ferrari in the book?
Can't say, but...
I'm writing a strongly worded letter
You do that.
Mr.
Meanwhile-
Frederick Brun. First of all, it's not the Russia. It's just Russia. Second of all,
That's his translator. It's not him.
Mr. Brun, please pass this note along to your translator. Whoever is translating this letter for you, if they are the same translator used on the book, it is not the Russia. You made me sound like an idiot when I tried to read an excerpt from your book on a podcast. So I shake my fist at thee, sir. No. Yeah, it's like one of those things, like certain car companies do have specific colors they have patented to them, and I believe Ferrari has a red. I believe Honda, of all people, has a specific blue they have patented. But yeah, the Ferrari should have been red. Dang it.
And it's not on my list.
I'm not entirely shocked by that. I know Xenia doesn't have the pull over you that she does over me. So I'm kind of like, once we got this high on the list, I figured it wasn't going to be there. I figured if it was going to be on your list, it was going to be further down. So once we got up to the top 10 and you hadn't mentioned it yet, I kind of figured I wasn't going to hear about it from you. But that's okay. That's okay. I'll forgive you your trespasses.
If this was a top 30, it might have made it. But yeah, not on the top 25.
I got a big chunk of cars that might have made it if we'd have done 30 or 35 even.
Now, my number 9, you're going to probably question my judgment because I have it at number 9. But it is definitely an iconic vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it is one that is absolutely close to your heart when you watch the James Bond films. In fact, if I remember correctly, I believe this is your favorite part of this movie. However, it's in my top 10, okay?
All right. I think I know where you're going with this, but we'll see.
From Diamonds Are Forever, Moon Buggy.
Moon Buggy!
Because Moon Buggy.
It's a fucking moon buggy, and Bond's driving a moon buggy, for crying out loud.
Now, with that said,
it's not just a moon buggy, it's Bond in a moon buggy. Oh, that makes it doubly great.
But it is a really goofy-looking moon buggy, and it's not exactly the most sturdy moon buggy. It's just kind of
loses a wheel here or there. I mean, that's
it looks like a moon buggy that might have been drawn in the 1940s and made out of cardboard for a movie, but still, it's a moon buggy, and James Bond drives it. So, number 9, Moon Buggy from Diamonds Are Forever, because Moon Buggy from Diamonds Are Forever.
The moon buggy had to be on this list, and I will admit I have it slightly higher than you, not a ton higher, so I can't really question your judgment too much. I would have questioned your judgment severely if it had not made the list at all, or if it had been, sub 15, then there would definitely have been some questioning of judgment. But at 9, I'm perfectly happy with that.
All right. Now that brings us to my number 8.
Indeed.
And here we'll get to a bit of commentary similar to something you said way further down on the list. And that's for my number 8 through my number 4. Really, I could have rolled D20 and just picked the order that way, with the possible exception of a little extra thought, as always, going into the next spot. But so between 8 and 4, do this next week and I might have them in a different order.
Right.
Do this next month and I'll do a different order again. And let's face it, with all of these lists, do it in 2 months and we'd have a completely different list.
Which is why we go back and revisit these lists, as a matter of fact.
Yes. So when I did not roll D20, but just gave it a little thought, for my number 8, I went with a vehicle which is not something that one would normally think of for James Bond. And yet, when he's in it, it makes for just the best chase scene ever. I am, of course, referring to the T-54 tank from GoldenEye.
I think it's a T-55, if I recall from the book.
It says T-54.
Oh, does it? In the book, I thought it said T-55. Maybe I read it wrong. But either way, it's a frickin' tank, which is why we needed the specific requirement that it was a rectangular or four-cornered land vehicle, because we both wanted to include the tank.
And that this is the one vehicle that we actually called out by name when we were trying to decide what counted. It's like, what about the tank? I want to include the tank. I want to include the tank. Okay, we can include the tank.
We'll figure out a way to include the dang tank.
Because James Bond in a frickin' tank, while he's still... Now, if he had been in military gear, it would not have worked. But
right.
Nope, he's in his standard spy attire, looking dapper and shit.
Right. I'm flipping through the book here, and I'm seeing where the confusion is coming in. In the beginning of the chapter of the unexpected ones, which is where the tank comes in, it shows tank T-54. However, when you go to the actual section where it shows a picture of James Bond driving the tank, the caption to that picture is, if the T-55 tank used by James Bond in GoldenEye was borrowed, the Ford Mondeo who drove them, blah, 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 goes into a different thing altogether. So there's several times where the tank is referred to as a T-55 in the book, and then in the beginning of the chapter he refers to it as the T-54. So that's interesting. I'm going to have to look that up and figure out, because even on that very first page, the title page for the unexpected ones, it says tank T-54, and the picture on the opposite side is the tank with the statue on top of it. And it says, the caption is, though perhaps not the most discreet means of transportation, the T-55 Soviet tank was a very effective one when driven by 007. So we'll have to look into that further and figure out which one it actually is, because it is referred to as both in the book.
Either way, it's a Russian tank.
It's a tank!
And
it's Bond driving a tank. It's even better than...
Bond destroys St. Petersburg while the general is drinking from a flask. So I had to include it on the list, and it had to be high up because it was my favorite chase scene. So, yeah, at number 8, the tank.
Well, I'm going to give you a little lesson in how to do a top 8 list, okay? Everybody listen up, this because, Ziggy tried, it's all right. But when it comes to a number 8 spot on this list, there's only one vehicle that could possibly go in the number 8 spot. And that's a Russian frickin' tank, for crying out loud. Whether it's a T-54 or a T-55, I don't even care right now. It's a freaking tank, and it's James Bond driving a tank, destroying a town while he's at it. It's just absolutely fantastic. And, yeah, it ended up at my number 8, surprisingly enough.
All right. Can't question your judgment at all.
That's the first one that we've come across that was dead on. We've had a couple of close ones, but that was the first dead on one. That's good.
All right. And that brings us to your coveted 007 spot.
Now, my 007 is one that you've already kind of hinted is not even on your list, which shocks and appalls me. And this is the one that I could not find a mention of or picture of in the book. Now, I may be wrong. If you found it, let me know, and let me know what page it's on so I can look it up. But cue the slide whistle. That AMC Hornet from The Man with the Golden Gun. Even with the
really
questionable at best sound effect. I can't fault the car for the sound effect they decided to throw in. But I have to give it credit for the stunt. The fact that it was a practical stunt, not special effects. Just absolutely fantastic. And even despite the sound effect and despite J.W. Pepper, I gotta give this one a big high spot on the list. And in fact, for me, the number 007 coveted position goes to that AMC Hornet from The Man with the Golden Gun. I can't whistle. I tried. It didn't work. See, they should have hired me to do the slide whistle for that film. Then it would have come out as nothing. And we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
You're weird.
Did you find this one in the book?
I don't remember seeing it when I looked through the book.
I definitely don't remember seeing it. And then I went back through, looking specifically through the text for mentions of it, and I didn't see any. I was like, okay, so I thought maybe this was the one that you were talking about completely escaped the book. But yeah, I didn't see any mentions of the Hornet in the book whatsoever, which I thought was odd considering that is an iconic stunt scene from the Bond film. I mean, yes, it did have the unfortunate sound effect, which I still don't know why anyone thought that was a good idea. I mean, you have to have multiple people in the decision-making process in a movie. There's more than one person looking at things saying, yeah, let's put that in. No, let's not put that in. So that means multiple people had to hear that slide whistle, watch that jump, and say, yep, that's what we want.
I have a theory. Most people don't smoke hash alone.
All right, so hey, you guys, we got to stay late editing this Golden Gun movie, right? Hey, listen, guys, I just got this bag of hash, man. You guys want to hit this up before we go do the editing? Yeah, all right, man. And hence the slide whistle Hornet stunt is born.
There we go.
I really wish it couldn't be explained away that way, but it probably can.
Now that brings us to my coveted number 007 spot.
Hit me.
Again, my 8 through 4 are interchangeable. And on the one hand, even right now, I want to switch things out.
There have been a couple of times I'm like, oh, how did that end up there?
But I can tell you the reason why, as I was flipping through between 4 and 8, where this particular one landed. It's because it's the 007 spot.
All right.
I can really easily see putting this at 4. I can really easily see you putting this at 4 or thereabouts.
All right.
Because I know you've put it higher than this. Because if you don't have this on your list, I question your judgment, sir.
Uh-huh.
So at my number 7 spot, vehicle that does not have missiles, guns, Zomji lasers, ejector seats.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, doesn't have any of that. I don't even think it has airbags. In fact, I know it doesn't have airbags because
Probably
it's early
not.
for that. But Citron 2CV from For Your Eyes Only.
I had a feeling.
Citron. Because Citron.
It's so great because it's just a Citron. It's just a little Citron 2CV. I didn't even realize when I first watched this movie, I thought it was a Beetle because I didn't know that Citron was a thing at the time. I was a kid. I didn't even know about vehicles that weren't available for sale in the United States. And Citron is certainly one that you will not find, at a dealership here. You might be able to find a used one for sale on like Craigslist or something, but you're certainly not just going to walk into a dealership and be like, "Hey, you got the new Citron in?" They'd be like, "Say what?" But yeah, that was just such a fantastic chase scene, and just to see it happen in a vehicle that was most decidedly not a Bond vehicle, especially after we saw the actual Bond vehicle with all the gadgets and all the technology, especially its anti-theft system.
Yes, it's very aggressive anti-theft system.
Extremely aggressive anti-theft system, so much so that I couldn't even justify. I don't, no spoilers or anything, but
it ain't on your list, is it?
It isn't. It isn't. Not that one for sure. Because like all it did was explode. Like, okay, it was cool. And
that's what she said.
From what I understand, at the time, it was a time when luxury vehicles like Lotus were in very high demand from car thieves. So it was basically very well known if you had a nice car like that, it was a target for thieves. Evidently, it was heavily cheered when the car exploded and took out the thieves, or the would-be thieves, within the universe in which we were. In our universe, people watching that on the Bond universe were like, "Yeah, that's right. Those thieves got what was coming to them. Sure, the car was blown up, but took those guys out with them, so it's cool."
Years later, they're voting for Trump. No.
Keep those Muslims away from my car. Something. No, I don't know what the hell's going on. I still cannot figure out. Yeah. We're not political, folks. We're not going to get into politics. We're not going to get into politics. But holy crap, are you serious? That's all I'll say. So number 7 for you is the Citron 2CV from For Your Eyes Only, is what I'm gathering.
Yes, because Citron. Because, awesome chase. It's proof that Bond didn't need to rely on the gadgets or the fancy cars. He could take any piece of crap off the street, including a European beater, and just make it go. And he made it go. And that Citron is just awesome. So
yeah,
my number 007, Citron 2CV from For Your Eyes Only.
All right. I want to question your judgment, but we're so close at the top of the list here that I feel the serious judgment questioning has passed us.
And it's the number 007 spot.
Yeah, and that's definitely a fair point as well, and I can't question that part of it at all. So, all right.
Now that brings us to my number 6 spot, and
your number, Alec Trevelyan.
Except Alec Trevelyan did not ever drive this car.
Did we see him drive any vehicle? I'm trying to think back. I mean, certainly he rode in some, but I don't know if we ever saw him drive anything specifically. We saw him fly a helicopter.
I don't believe we ever saw him drive, and I think Xenia was actually flying it.
They were both in the, yeah.
Yeah, but she was the pilot, I think.
Yeah.
But in any case, so, yeah, Alec would not have been able to drive this car because it didn't exist. You can't drive this car because it's not for you.
What?
No, it's for James Bond. Only for James Bond.
For his eyes only.
And why? Because when 009 came to pick it up, there was just a bucket of warm champagne waiting for him. Yes. I'm referring, of course, to the specially made Aston Martin DB10 Inspector, and with the relatively unfinished control panel, and yet it harkens back to another certain vehicle where things were actually marked with a Dymo labeler, and Bond has no idea what's going on. So
I did forget about those labels. Oh man, if I'd remembered the labels, that would have been higher on my list. It would have. Just the labels in themselves would have propelled it.
And then he goes for atmosphere, and what does he get? Show tunes. And he's just like, oh god, no. Show tunes. And he's just like, oh, just wait, there's a future discussion that we're going to have in front of a lot of people that'll harken back to those show tunes. You think I'm kidding?
Oh my gosh. Oh man. Yep. Okay. You are free to question my judgment because I forgot about that specific aspect of it, and that this one should have been higher on my list. It should have been. Oh, what was I thinking putting it all the way down at 12 when it should have been way up there in the top 10? Oh, man.
And this is why I questioned your judgment, sir.
Oh, I feel ashamed. I do. I should have known better.
See, this is the equivalent of the Ghost Rider penance stare. So,
single tear.
Yes, at my number 6, the Aston Martin DB10 from Spectre with all of its atmosphere. So that brings us to your number 6, sir.
All right. My number 6, one that you've already mentioned. Now that we're getting into the nitty-gritty, we are getting to ones that are definitely on our both of our top 10 lists. This is a vehicle that I felt deserved a few spots higher bump than you had it at originally, but not so dramatically so that I had to question your judgment. And of course, I'm referring to the Moon Buggy from Diamonds Are Forever, because
Moon Buggy.
James Bond in a Moon Buggy, for crying out loud. I mean, how can you not love that? Bond in a buggy. I mean, freaking Moon Buggy. And yes, it's poorly put together. I mean, but think about it this way. I look at that and I'm like, yes, it was poorly put together. And yes, it should have held up better, but at the same time,
it held up better than all those ATVs.
True.
And all those other cars.
It wasn't
and
even
other
a real moon
after.
buggy. It was a prop for a supposed faking of the moon landing set, which was a downside to the movie because I don't want. I hate that one of my favorite franchises is also one that in any way promotes the idea that the moon landing was in any way fake, because are you fucking serious? But still, James Bond in a moon buggy. Had
because
to be up there
moon
for
buggy.
me. Exactly. So yeah, my number 6, moon buggy.
No question. None at all. Except, what's your number 5, sir?
At number 5, another one that you've already mentioned, then that I think I gave you a little bit of a sideways look because it was so low on your list. And this is one that, on the outside, this is not a sexy vehicle by any stretch of the imagination, for sure. Indeed, it is rather plain. However, the use that it's put to in this film, and the abuse, and the use that it's put to even after the abuse, makes it well worth an inclusion on this list, and I think a top 5 inclusion on the list. And that is the Renault 11 from A View to a Kill. The freaking thing gets cut in half, and still Bond is able to drive it around.
Good thing it was front-wheel drive.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, I definitely had to put that much higher on my list, and in fact, my top 5, that Renault 11 from A View to a Kill. Oh, yeah.
I kind of question you're putting it at number 5, but okay, I understand. I understand. I question it, but I understand. Now, what I didn't understand is how you could take the car that I have at number 5 and have it not in your top 10. Because, you know what? The fact that this car is my number 5 is your fault.
All right.
See, originally I was kind of meh about this car. But over the course of all this time, these 3 years that you and I have been doing these podcasts, you have been talking up this car and how cool it is and how cool the scenes it was involved in are.
Uh-oh.
And it's soaked in, and I bought it. I didn't buy the car. I can't afford the car. I would like to afford the car, even with all the options. Even though it's an older car by now, I'd still like the car. It's just the options that would make it expensive now. But the BMW 750 IAL from Tomorrow Never Dies, complete with cell phone remote control and angry German woman who yells at you.
Please put on your seatbelt.
On your knees. No. Bondage, James. Bondage in cars. No. That you sold me on this car. I now think this is an awesome car. So this is your fault that I have it at my number 5 on my list.
I had it at a special spot. It was my lucky number 13. So, you know.
Fair enough.
Honestly, it could be higher. It could be low. You know, it's one of those ones that it's cool because of the use it got. It's not a sexy car in and of itself. It's definitely a car that I would definitely own because it's a nice casual car, but it's not sexy and it's not ugly. It's just kind of there. It's a car. You know, that's what it looks like. It's not anything special. It's not a sporty anything.
But it's the ultimate driving machine.
But it is a very nice car. And in the films, especially with all of the features and the, you know, cell phone remote control, which is actually a possibility now. You can actually have a car that you could control with your cell phone now. It wouldn't be exactly the same, but I mean, the fact of the matter is you can wire up a car and control it with a cell phone if you wanted to. So, hey, you know what? It could easily be higher on my list. I definitely won't question your judgment, and I'm sorry that it was as low as my 13. Although I do find it a little funny that our 13s and 5s were exactly swapped.
Oh, yeah? Quite true.
So, while not hitting an exact number match like our number 8s, it is still kind of funny when I see ones that we had the exact same difference of. So,
indeed. That is kind of cool. I like it.
It's fun. It's a fun little thing.
And I like this car.
It is a fun little car.
So that is my number 5. And that brings us to my number 4.
Indeed.
Which shocked me that I had it this high.
Really?
I admit it. It absolutely shocked me. Because when I first said, let's do a car list, I would never have thought that this car would have cracked the top 10. Maybe between 25 and 20, because it's a damn cool car, and then I thought about it. And then I looked at the sexy pictures in the book. I'm still referring to James Bond Cars by Frederick Brunn.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I thought about it some more. And I'm like, this was a freaking awesome car. This was a great car. And not only is it a sexy looking car, but the gadgets. Zombie gadgets. And so, that is why, way back when, I questioned your judgment.
Oh, okay.
Because I am referring to, at number 4, a car that James Bond did not drive, but which sure tried to beat the crap out of him. The Jaguar XKR.
Wow.
Driven by Zhao.
All right.
Die Another Day.
All right. I'm surprised that it made it this far on your list, and I do remember you questioning my judgment way back at 22. There were so many cars that Bond actually had direct contact with that I liked so much better, but I can't question your judgment because I love that car, and I love the fact that we got to see a supercar on supercar fight instead of just Bond with his supercar getting away from normal cars, which was pretty much the standard up until then.
Yeah.
So I really dug that.
And that's part of what ended up propelling it this high, because at first it got propelled up pretty high because it's a sexy car. And all those gadgets, like you said, missiles that shoot out missiles.
Yeah, basically it's got missiles on missiles. Its missiles have missiles.
But also the fact that this is the one time that the bad guy has a Bond car that is a full-on Bond car, not just, the poison dart that shoots out the side mirror, even though that's cool. But I mean, just the full-on, balls to the walls, everything you've got, I've got one more grenade than you do car. And that, I think, also is worthy of propelling it higher. So that's what finally brought it into the top 10. And then this is such a damn hot car.
It really is. Oh, those Jaguars, it seems like, for some reason, in the Bond universe, the good guys drive Astons, the bad guys drive Jaguars.
And that is a whole ad campaign waiting to happen, isn't it?
With the exception of, it seems that Judi Dench's M specifically likes being driven around in Jaguars. But as far as the bad guys themselves specifically driving, they prefer the Jaguars, while Bond is in either a BMW or an Aston Martin.
And who wouldn't want to be in this Jaguar XKR? It is just a hot car.
Oh, it really is. Even in that green, which normally I don't dig green cars, but for this, it worked. It really did.
It's just, wow. So, amazingly enough, something not only associated with a movie that would be irredeemable if not for our good friend Ning Shin.
Thank you again for that, because that was a fantastic... Every time I think back on that movie now, I think about it in that context, and it makes it a little better.
And even though the car is driven by a character who I otherwise consider a waste of space, I still have to put it at number 4. And before you go on with your number 4, I'm going to make a prediction.
Oh.
We've already pretty much guessed that our number 1 is going to be exactly the same. Without saying saying it directly, we've pretty much guessed that. I'm going to predict that our number 2 and 3 are also exactly the same in the same order.
Well, I will tell you that your prediction is not correct because you've already mentioned my number 3.
All right. I'm wrong.
But the 2 and 1 is still possible for sure.
All right. So what do you have at number 4?
In fact, I'm very curious as to what you have now at number 3 because everything except my 2 and 1 you've already mentioned. So I'm curious as to either what I've missed or what you had a particular love for that I didn't quite feel the same about, which is interesting. Either way.
Now I'm thinking our number 2 is not going to be the same if I've already mentioned your number. Well, actually, I don't know your number 4 yet, so Let's find out.
Well, my number 4 is one that you already mentioned.
In that case, there is something that you missed. Okay, go on.
My number 4 is one that I felt... Now, you did not mention this a long time ago. This was not one that was in your 20s or something like that. This is one that you mentioned fairly recently. I was a little surprised that it was as low as it was because it was not only just a beautiful car, but because it is so iconic and it is... just in the way it was used, both in the film as a vehicle, but also as a plot device, which I really like. I like the fact that this wasn't just a car for the sake of a car, but it was actually part of the plot of the film. It was actually a fairly integral part of the plot of the film, which I thought was really cool. So, for me, number 4 could be none other than the 1937 Rolls-Royce Phantom, driven by Eric Goldfinger, with a license plate of AU1, of course. AU being the chemical symbol for gold, for those of you who didn't pass your high school chemistry classes. Just absolutely beautiful car.
Or for our friends who are in Europe who didn't pass your first grade chemistry classes, I'm sure.
All right. Take it the American education system while you're at it. I still have friends on Facebook who honestly believe that the way that they're teaching basic math now is quote unquote Common Core, as if that's what Common Core means. Like, that's, first of all, A, that's not what that means. And B, if you just take a step back to look at it for a second, you'll see that they're actually teaching kids how to think about numbers instead of just teaching them how to solve a particular problem. Anyways, not going to get into that. Again, we're not political here. We're not trying to get into politics or any of that kind of crap. But yeah, so anyways, that being said, it's rough out there these days. But yeah, this is a beautiful car. You got Nick Nack driving Goldfinger around.
Nick Nack?
I'm sorry.
How dare you, sir?
I'm sorry. Odd job. My bad. I'm confusing.
Wow.
I'm confusing my diminutive henchman.
If you would like to flog Eric online, you can email him at eric@foureyedradio.com. You can send tweets to Eric J. Dewey on Twitter. You can also make comments at hermajestiespod.com. You can also find us on Facebook at hermajestiespod at facebook.com/hermajestiespod. And if you would like to say nice things to me, or if you,
I see how this goes.
Or if you would like to question my judgment, you can tweet me at CinemaOTR
Fair
or
enough.
email me at Ziggy@cinemaontherocks.com.
I see how this is going. All right. Fair enough.
Knick-knack.
I meant odd job, and you damn well know it.
God, can you imagine if Knick-knack threw the hat?
Oh my gosh. Hey!
He's alive, but he'll never have kids.
Castrated from 1,000 paces. That's just not right. Anyway, I liked the fact that not only was the car beautiful, not only was the car enigmatic of a villain, but the fact that it was part of the plot. The fact that he was smuggling gold by using pieces of this car as his method of smuggling gold was just absolutely fantastic. I love that.
I agree.
Oh, man.
Oh, you are not going to long time.
Tonight's podcast mistakes are brought to you by Blackstone Merlot from California 2014 vintage. At Blackstone, we know that what matters to you is taste. If a wine tastes blah, 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 some California Merlot is bringing you my mistakes today.
All right. Now, I'm going to make another prediction.
All right.
Our number 3s are going to be different, and my number 3 is going to be your number 2. That's my guess.
All right.
So what is your number 3, sir?
So my number 3, again, one that you have already mentioned, so definitely not one that could possibly be your 3-1. Because Citron, man. Seriously.
Citron!
Oh, man, this is a fantastic chase scene, and just the fact that it happens in a vehicle that you would not associate with Bond. The fact that it happens in a vehicle that you would most explicitly not associate with Bond. It would be anything but a Bond vehicle. But yet, it's the best Bond vehicle because it just shows how cool Bond is, even without the gadgets and the toys and the Aston Martin badge or the BMW badge. He can still make any vehicle be what he needs it to be because he's frickin' James Bond. So for me, that Citroen had to rank really high, and I'm almost surprised it didn't make it into the 2 spot. It was a real close call, actually, between 3 and 2 for me. But ultimately, I did like the accessory package on another vehicle a little bit more, so it didn't quite make it into number 2, but number 3 is the Citroen 2CV from one of my favorites, For Your Eyes Only.
All right. And in the next Bond movie, we're going to see Daniel Craig on a Segway.
I'd be all right with that.
Now, my number 3
cool.
is absolutely an iconic vehicle, without question. I mean, it has to be at this point, doesn't it?
Right.
In fact, it's one of 2 vehicles where a tiny representation of it is sitting in front of me as we speak. In fact, you gave me this tiny representation of this vehicle.
Oh, no.
So, my number 3 from The Spy Who Loved Me is the Lotus Esprit submarine, which the KGB got the manual for 2 years ago. Which is why Agent XXX knows exactly how to operate the deadly weapons inside. Because just awesome car. Just awesome car. And submarine. I mean, it's just, and it's so 70s, but so timeless, awesome, cool, anyway. Submarine car! Come on! And it was a hot car even before it turned into a submarine. So, yes, the Lotus Esprit from The Spy Who Loved Me is my number 3.
All right. I will skip in here real quick just because you were correct. My number 3, or your number 3, was my number 2. You did have that one pegged. I did have that same one as my number 2, and I'm shocked and appalled that it's as low as 3 on your list. How dare you, sir? No, but seriously, the Lotus Esprit is a fantastic car. It's a great looking car. I just love the car in general. In For Your Eyes Only, we got to actually see it in use quite a bit. We got to see another Lotus Esprit, the turbo version, in For Your Eyes Only. We got to see it twice, actually. Once exploding, and another just kind of being
Ferrara.
there. You know, the second time we saw it was a different vehicle, but still the Lotus Esprit Turbo, and it just was kind of there. Which is why neither version of the Lotus Esprit from For Your Eyes Only made my list. But the one from The Spy Who Loved Me, it's a freaking submarine, for crying out loud. So, yeah, your number 3 is my number 2. So, then I must know, what is your number 2?
I can't believe you forgot this car.
I don't know.
Even if you weren't going to have it in your top 5 or even your top 10, it had to be on your list. I am shocked. Honestly shocked.
I'm probably going to be shocked too. It's probably something that I'm going to instantly remember and slap myself for.
Because this is just a super, super sexy car. And thanks to the fact that they've had optional extras installed, it is the ultimate winter driving machine. And that would be the Aston Martin V8 Volante from The Living Daylights.
Oh, that was one that just barely didn't make my list, but man,
how the hell did it not make your list? You consciously left it off?
It was, it's in my list of almost made it.
I would have
but
been
that was the
more
one with
understanding if you'd forgotten it.
Oh, but that was the one with the
Outriggers, the Spike Tigers,
shit.
the missile launchers, the afterburner.
For some reason, I'm in my mind, I'm picturing those things on a Lotus for some reason. I don't know why. But yeah, that was that Volante. Okay, you know what? Do over. Mulligan. Let's scratch the 280S from Octopussy. As much as I love saying Octopussy, we're putting the Volante on the list. It's in my list of almost made it, but I forgot about that scene. I totally forgot that scene was that car.
Did you just blank out from the
No, that for some reason
in a car and cello?
For some reason it didn't click together. That scene, I picture that scene, but I guess my mind focuses on cello case in that scene. Oh man. All right. Well, like we always say, we do this list in a week. It'll be completely different because I will remember.
List in 5 minutes. Eric's list is going to be completely different.
Definitely the top 10 for sure. Oh, I question my own judgment. How could I have possibly forgotten about that scene? Because I saw the Volante in the book, and I was like, oh yeah, the Volante is a nice car. But it didn't click with me. That scene didn't click with that car, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together and remember that's the car that was in that scene, because if I had, then shoot. All right, that is my bad. I'll bring the beers.
All right, I'm going to hold you to that.
Oh, man, oh, man, oh, man.
So at my number 2, the Aston Martin V8 Volante from The Living Daylights, because it is the ultimate winter driving machine.
Which, as I learned from the book, this is not a fact that I knew beforehand, but as I was flipping through the book, I happened to read about this vehicle. The Aston Martin that's actually in The Living Daylights is not technically the V8 Volante, because they were not producing the V8 for the Volante at that time. It was the V6. They had not yet put the V8 into production. However, they were going to, so that's why it was marketed as such. So the actual vehicle we saw in the movie is technically a V6, not a V8.
More fuel efficient. Hey.
There you go. I'll take it.
Now, with that said, after you forgot that, I don't know if we should let you have the honor of revealing number 1, which is no surprise to anyone who has seen any James Bond movies, including movies that do not have this car.
Exactly.
However,
this movie, this car, and I'm sure at this point, because it hasn't been mentioned yet, there's no way that this could have escaped notice. So I'm 100% sure that our number 1 car is identical, which we pretty much knew going into this. I mean, we pretty much knew that the number 1 car was going to be the number 1 car because it is the number 1 James Bond car. I mean,
and they keep cementing it now.
Yes, they wouldn't keep bringing it back and putting it in our faces as James Bond's car if it wasn't meant to be James Bond's car, you know? So, hey, if you want the honors of revealing the quote-unquote secret first, go ahead.
Nope, all you.
All right. Well, just in case your number 1 is different than mine somehow. At number 1, I have a vehicle which is not only iconic in style and grace, beauty. It's a beautiful car, but it's definitely featured in the most James Bond films. And, first seen in Goldfinger, brought back in GoldenEye, brought back in Casino Royale, brought back again in Skyfall, even though it was mutilated, brought back again in Spectre, in its mutilated form and up to its recreation. The Aston
I told
Martin
you to bring it back in
DB5.
one piece, not just to bring back one piece.
Aston Martin DB5. First introduced to us in Goldfinger with all the bells and whistles that you could expect from a Bond car these days. Just absolutely a gorgeous car, just on the outside. And then you add in ejector seats and machine guns and a bulletproof screen that covers up the back window and oil slicks that can drop out and smoke screens, and I'm missing other things. Changeable license plates, and I think it had extending bumpers as well for some reason. I mean, just everything that you could possibly think a Bond car should have.
It had the little
out
from the axle. It had a little saw that could slice through the tires of the car next to you.
There you go. I'm like, I knew it had something else. I know I'm missing something. Just absolutely a fantastic, fantastic car. And the fact that they keep bringing it back, even in the current age. I mean, they brought it in Goldfinger. And then in GoldenEye, we see it again. You
also saw it briefly in Thunderball.
Oh, yes, that's correct. So then from Thunderball, then into GoldenEye, where we see it, that's the car that Famke is having her chase with in the Ferrari. And then we see it in Casino Royale again as the prize that he has won from a game of Baccarat. Although
with Demetrios.
Exactly. Who wasn't wearing a mask, oddly enough. Weird, I know. We see it brought back in Skyfall when he... I love how he reaches for the cover like he's going to he flips up the cover. Like, I got the button right here. It's like, oh, go ahead, eject me. M in that scene, just absolutely fantastic. Just everything about that car is James Bond. That's what it comes down to. That car is James Bond in every possible respect. And I love it. I love it. It's beautiful.
Indeed.
What are your feelings about the Aston Martin DB5? I mean, before we reveal your number 1 choice, which is obviously something else entirely.
Well, oddly enough, my number 1 choice is the Aston Martin DB5 for all of the wonderful reasons. I know, for all of the wonderful reasons that you have already brought up. And I'll go on to say, because you've covered pretty much everything.
Sorry.
No, good on you. What I will say is my favorite quick moment of just the car. because I agree with you. My favorite scene in the car is go ahead, eject me. That's just freaking awesome. But my favorite scene, my favorite appearance of just the car where you just see it is its appearance in Skyfall when he first opens the door. And the reason is, I mean, the car is posing. I mean, that's a centerfold shot of that car. And I love how they had the class to use the orchestral cue from Goldfinger. If you listen to it, that music is from Goldfinger. So that I just thought that was just such a great way to bring that car back. And of course, I love that we ended up using the gadgets on the car. It wasn't just an escape vehicle. I was sorry to see it shredded, but glad to see that Q and his team of boffins could make everything work again, because it would have just been a shame for that to have been the end of that car. And this is a car that deserves to live forever. So, yes, the iconic Bond car is my forward note on this line. The Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger et al. Just the Bond car. That's it.
Yeah, there's no mistaking. I mean, if you ask people who even aren't necessarily fans of the franchise, if people who just have a passing acquaintance with the franchise, who just happen to know about it, what's James Bond's car? Most of them will quote the Aston Martin DB5, or at least Aston Martin at the very least, because they have been so prolific in their product placement, even more so than any other vehicle. But yeah, just the fact that it's been featured in so many different films, this specific car, like you said, Goldfinger and GoldenEye and Casino Royale and Skyfall and Spectre, it's Bond's car, even more so than the car of the books, which I still feel is, quite a bit Bond's car, but yet this is even more so.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the car. And is there any doubt that this is the car that would have to be the cover car of the book we've been using as our reference material? Of course not. It had to be the cover car. And again, for those of you who would like to peruse a copy of James Bond Cars by Frederick Brunn yourself, just visit our website, hermajestiespod.com, go to the section for this episode, and we will have a link directly to the book right there for you.
Oh, yeah. We're very kind like that.
Yes, and you would be kind to us if you would purchase it through that link because, again, no extra cost to you. It helps us keep this show free. Yay.
Oh, yeah. Everybody likes free, especially when it comes to their podcasts. So, definitely check out our website at hermajestiespod.com. Click on that link if you want to get that book. If you want to buy anything else from Amazon, you can do your shopping there. Check out our awesome sponsor, Revenge Lover Designs, at revengelover.com. That's another way to help out the show. We love having you guys as listeners, and we want to keep bringing these shows to you absolutely free. We never want to charge for our shows. That's not something that we ever want to do, because let's face it, there's plenty of free podcasts out there, but we do want to keep things running. And if you can help us out with that, hey, that'd be fantastic. We appreciate that.
Now, with that said, I promised earlier on that since we knew that number one would probably be a little anticlimactic, because let's face it, I can't imagine that either of us ever thought that the DB5 was not going to be number one. We decided to give you an extra bonus at the end of the episode, and it wasn't going to be just the commercial for ourselves.
Right.
Nope. I decided.
Fair enough.
That we should have a little extra thing going on where we pimped our own Bond car. Yes, we got to take any combination of 007 gadgets and use them to pimp up a non-lethal Bond car. I stress non-lethal. So, no missiles, no knives, no machine guns, no zombie lasers, no torpedoes, no flechettes, no landmines, none of that.
Lasers aren't meant to kill, but only to... No, I'm just throwing things... I'm just throwing shit at the wall, see what sticks.
Because I know Eric wanted to shoot people on the freeway. I know why
you do. Have you been on the freeways in Arizona? You'd want to shoot people too, okay? That's all I'm saying.
I've been on the freeways in Vancouver. So, yes, I understand. I want to shoot people too. But
fair enough. I believe you.
Now, with that said, with the proviso that it had to be a family-friendly, not necessarily family-friendly.
You said non-lethal.
Okay, depends on your version of family-friendly. We'll get there. A non-lethal Bond car. However...
Okay. I did go with that.
On that note, I also thought, if I just leave it at that, we're going to pick the sexiest car we can think of. So, okay, pimp your own Aston Martin DB5 or pimp a DeLorean, or in the
1994
case
Dodge Viper
of
RT10. Just saying.
Eric, pimp a Viper is probably what Eric would probably do. So, I thought, no. Then I thought along the lines of Citroen. I'm like, that's been a Bond car, so can't do that. So I want to pick a totally unsexy car that's in current production, so no Yugo. And didn't want to pick a Mini because that's still too iconically British. So I thought the least Bondish car I could possibly come up with to pimp was a 2016 Toyota Prius. We get to pick the colors. It has to be a factory color, but get to pick the color. So whose car are we pimping first, yours or mine?
You know what? I figured since we chose, hopefully I read the notes right, we chose 007 conversions to our vehicles.
Yes.
So I figured we could kind of go back and forth a little bit, maybe do one or two of the conversions I would make to mine, and then one or two of the ones you would make to yours, or vice versa.
Sounds good.
And kind of go back and forth a little bit and see where we land.
All right, so who wants to start?
Well, I started the list, so I will let you begin with the car.
All right. Now, my 2016 Toyota Prius, and no, don't drive one. I drive something else. I decided to go with hypersonic red for my color. I admit I was kind of disappointed because a previous model Prius came in this nice orange that kind of reminded me of the Jaguar that Hanks drives, but they don't have it in that as a factory color anymore. So I went with hypersonic red because if you're going to pimp a car, it's certainly not going to be beige or white or anything like that. So went with that. Now my first two gadgets, they kind of go together, so I'm going to give you my first two in a row.
Okay.
One, because it's a Bond car. You have to have the ejector seat. Come on, you have to have the ejector seat. And it's not necessarily meant as a lethal weapon. I mean, you're not necessarily driving over a bridge where they'd end up in drink or...
Maybe you're upside down on the ice and you need to flip your car back over. You don't know.
Indeed. Or maybe you're about to get into a major accident and you would like your passenger to survive.
Exactly. Yes. It's a safety feature.
And with that actual thing in mind, I would also like to survive the crash, which is why I have included air from Spectre, of course. I get an ejector seat with a parachute.
Fair enough.
Now, I might include a parachute on the passenger side as well. Think about that. But So, air. So, means of ejecting myself and my passenger from my 2016 Prius are my first two Bond gadgets.
All right. Well, with mine, I chose the paint job as one of my modifications because...
Oh, you didn't.
Because the paint job I felt was not... Because you said start with a factory standard.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not something that you would get factory standard. So I had to do this as a modification. And I really wanted to reveal this as my last one. So I'm going to hang on to this one for just a minute. But
so you're just going to let me sit here and cringe because I think I know what it is and I'm going to oh God. But go ahead, do that.
So I'm going to hang on to that one. But I'm going to say that one of my 007 upgrades was actually the paint job of the vehicle. I will say this, though. For one of my other ones, I will note two of my updates that actually are very coexistent with your own. The first of which is, of course, you have to have the ejector seat. I mean, come on. Now, whether that be for the passenger or the driver, whatever, you got to have an ejector seat. I mean, what respectable Bond car doesn't have an ejector seat? Come on. So I definitely do have the ejector seat in mine as well. The second one is a different version of a safety control feature not taken directly from a Bond film. See, now I believe you took all of your stuff from things that we had seen in the Bond films.
Yes.
That wasn't exactly clear in the notes, so I took cues from other movies and television shows as well, not just the Bond universe specifically. So my version of air in this case is actually foam, and it's the foam safety system airbag, whatever you want to call it, from Demolition Man. When they crash the car, the entire inside of the car fills up instantly with foam that protects the driver and any passengers and prevents any injuries and is easily broken apart so that people can get out of the vehicle once that's done. So for me, I just had to have a safety feature in there, you know what I mean? So that was my safety feature. The foam from Demolition Man. And if you haven't seen Demolition Man, seriously, that's an awesome movie. Cheesy as hell, but fun. Go watch it.
It is fun, Demolition Man. Wow. Okay.
So what's your next update?
My next update I'll do a one for this time.
Okay.
I do have another twofer, but
All right.
I'll do a one for this time. This is something that I specifically would be more inclined to think about than you because of the climates that I've lived in. I really like the permanent tire inflation and tire spike package from the Volante as ultimate winter driving modifications.
Yes. I didn't think about that, but yeah, absolutely. That would be fantastic.
And not just in winter, but for any kind of off-roading. Because I imagine hard-packed desert or something like that where you'd want a little extra traction. I mean, who really wants to get out and do tire change? Screw that.
Right.
And I don't want to change a flat either. So a tire that's going to automatically reinflate itself even after I've punctured it.
Yeah. Also featured on our 750.
So, yes, the tire spike permanent inflation package, because I figured that's a whole thing.
Yeah, it's just the tire, so yeah.
Yeah, so
I'm good with that.
I've included that as a safety feature on my vehicle.
All right. Since you did a combo deal as your next one, I'm going to do one that I originally thought would be too much of a combo deal to include, but yet I just had to have it. And so my 2016 Ford Prius...
Toyota.
They're all interchangeable at this point. I don't even know. Toyota Prius. Wait, what does Ford have? Does Ford have a hybrid? Anything?
They have their Focus can be a hybrid.
Oh, but not a dedicated hybrid model like the Prius is, right?
Not that I'm thinking of offhand, but I might be wrong.
Huh.
It's been a while since I've driven Fords.
Me too. I used to have not a Taurus. What did I have? Tempo. That's what I had. I had a Tempo.
I had one too. That was actually a really good car.
It wasn't great, but it was all right.
It wasn't sexy, but damn, the thing worked.
Yeah, it did run for forever. I will admit that. But anyway, so for my Toyota Prius, I'm going to go ahead and put the complete submarine conversion pack from the Spy Who Loved Me from that Lotus. I want my Prius to go underwater when I need it to. Minus the rockets, because those are lethal, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But the underwater part, the ability to go submarine style, that part, that entire package, I'm taking.
I thought about it, but I couldn't think of a reason why I'd want to. So I skipped that one.
You like coral reefs and stuff, fun to look at.
I know, but, at this point, as soon as I surfaced, I would probably have somebody from the local DNR sitting there writing me a ticket. And it's like, how dare you mess with the coral reefs and the sharks and all that? Sorry, I was just being an eco-tourist. In a Prius? Yes, it's a hybrid.
And your point?
Yes. So, but all right. So for my next gadget, something that absolutely had to have, and again, this is your fault. Who doesn't want a car with a cell phone remote control?
Oh, yeah.
So, cell phone remote control, thank you for my car. I already have decided I can't live without a remote start now that I have been making good use of one. So, yeah, more control of the car with a cell phone? Yes. And hey, if you want to include the German chick, I'm fine with that.
I think that's actually available in most, not most, I would say in some GPS I
could actually just have Siri yell at me if I wanted to.
There you go.
But anyway, so yeah, cell phone remote control.
All right. One upgrade that I would make. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do a quick twofer here. First of all, if I'm Bond and I need to get away fast and be able to hide from the authorities and or bad guys, gotta have those rotating license plates. Various different plates, especially if I'm driving around in a, Prius that nobody's going to really notice. If I had a different license plates, people are like, that's just another car, forget it. So, gotta have the rotating license plates, similar to the ones in the DB5 in Goldfinger. Another upgrade I would have specifically to the Prius, instead of the lithium-ion batteries that it has currently powering its electric engine, I would change those over to lithium polymer batteries, which hold the same amount of charge. They're virtually identical, except with the polymer, you can actually mold them into different shapes, which means you can fit them into different spaces within the vehicles, giving you potentially more boot space, or I'm thinking maybe a back seat that lays down, makes some room in case you have a visitor in your vehicle and you need to...
That sounds like you're throwing a third one in there.
That's all part and parcel with the lithium polymer. The lithium polymer batteries is what makes the lay down back seat that turns into a bed with music and lights and everything possible. So I'm just it's combo. It's combo deal. You don't think it's combo deal?
I'm thinking I need to add a gadget to my car at this point.
All right, we can have 008. I don't care.
No. I also have a combo deal for my next.
Well, there you go
gadgetry.
then.
This is a sensible combo deal. Of course, if you're going to be evading the law, bad guys, stalkers, jealous boyfriends, whatever, you'll want the rotating license plates because Bond car, rotating license plates. Come on.
Hell yeah.
And in case you are actively evading the law while you're using those rotating license plates, you will want to include the smoke screen.
Oh.
Non-lethal. All it does is obscure your vision. Smoke screen. So there we go. That's 2 more gadgets, which leaves me with 1 more after this.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and give my second to last before revealing my final one. And that would be, this is from a... it makes me sad when I think about this television program because I loved it so much when I was a kid. And yet, I talk to people about it, and 90% of them don't know that this show existed. And yet, it was so cool. At least when I was 12, I thought so. This show is the reason that one of my favorite cars ever even made it into production. And it's been produced from the year this show came out, or actually technically the year after this show originally debuted, until this year they're discontinuing it after this
I remember
year.
breaking the news to you.
I'm very disappointed in this. The show, little known but much loved by me, was called Viper. It began, Paramount had this idea for a show that was essentially a retelling, and not necessarily a reboot, but a retelling of a similar story that we heard in Knight Rider. You know, we've got this guy who's not really a cop, but is a really great driver, and they're going to recruit him to drive this supercar that has all these special features to help stop crime and blah, 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 whatever. The car they chose was a car that debuted in 1993 as a concept car only, the Dodge Viper. This was not ever intended to be put into production. It was just a concept car. Paramount saw this car, they loved this car, and they said, we must have this car for our show that we're doing. And in fact, they ended up naming the show Viper after the car. In 1994, the car itself was put into production and became the sexiest car to ever hit the damn road. Oh my God, this car is beautiful. The president of the charity that I am vice president of, Comicare, owns one of these cars, and I am still debating whether or not I want to kill him and steal his car. It's a tough call. I mean, I love the guy, but damn, that car is sexy. Is all I'm saying. He has a 1994 Viper RT10 in the cherry red. I just love the car. It's beautiful. However, in the show, the car transformed. One of the tricks it had was the fact that it transformed from the little red hot sports car convertible into this deadly gray Defender version of the Viper. If you've never seen this, just Google Dodge Viper Defender and you'll see the transformation version of the car that I'm talking about. They only ever made 2 of them. One of them is on display somewhere in some... It's owned by somebody, but it is on the display.
Somebody owns it?
Somebody owns one of them. The other one is missing.
I would have thought that a squirrel owned it or something.
No, the other one is one is owned and put on display so people can actually see it. The other one, I believe, the last I heard anyway, it was missing. It kind of vanished. So somebody somewhere has a Dodge Viper Defender in a storage unit or something, just sitting
probably next to the stolen DB5,
just biding their time. You're like, well, one of the specific features that the Dodge Viper Defender had was a static pulse gun that was used to disable other vehicles. Out of the sides, basically where the foot railings would be essentially on the car, popped out these guns that didn't shoot any bullets or missiles or anything like that. Instead, it shot a static electric pulse that was specifically designed to disable the electrical system of another vehicle.
I see what you're doing here.
So my 2016 Toyota Prius would also have these static pulse guns from the Dodge Viper Defender, from the show Viper, which for the first 2 seasons was a fantastic show. Don't bother watching the second 2 seasons because that was some sort of resurrection from Paramount when they created the UPN network to try to actually have their own network on TV. This was one of the shows they resurrected, trying to put on it, but they changed all the actors, they changed all the characters, and it was garbage. Don't watch that. If you can find the first 2 seasons, watch those. Some of them are available on YouTube. And yes, it's cheesy as hell, but I mean, come on, it's awesome.
Well, it took us a while to get there, but so we have these emitters.
Static pulse guns. Yes.
All right. So for my final bit of pimping of my car,
yes,
I'm going to go with your mulligans of multiple things being only one item, because really that's what I'm doing with this.
I'll allow it.
And this is again inspired by Bond, more so other vehicles than cars, but it still works just fine.
All right.
Thinking, inspired by a certain iceberg submarine, maybe a escape pod submarine. I'm thinking the Love Nest conversion.
Oh yeah, you're talking full bed.
Yeah, where the seats fold down, the curtains come down.
I'm
maybe
assuming there's a champagne cooler involved. There's got to be a champagne cooler. He had a champagne cooler in the DB5 in GoldenEye.
Yeah.
Shit.
So, and don't tell me there's no room in a Prius. I know for a fact there was room in a Pinto, so there's going to be room in a Prius.
I don't even want to think about that. I really don't.
But yes, so for my final pimping of my Prius, the Love Nest conversion. Because why wouldn't you? It's a Bond car. And this is where it can become family friendly, because where do you think families come from?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm cringing at your final modification because
I don't think it's as bad as you think it's going to be, quite honestly, but still, it had to be done. Now, I know this is this goes completely against one of my other modifications, which was designed to make it hide from law enforcement or the bad guys or whoever might be chasing you.
Yeah.
But as long as they're not in a helicopter, they won't know. And that is, of course, this car needs to have a hot, bright, royal blue paint job, complete with a full Union Jack right on the roof. It's got to be done. Got to be done.
That is not where I thought you were going.
I can't. Now I want to know where you thought I was going with that, because I can't imagine what else I would put on the car, paint job wise, to make it.
Not necessarily a paint job. Vanish.
Oh, no, even I didn't get that depraved.
Good. I like the Union Jack. In fact, you know what? You can have that one for free.
Oh, geez. In that case, I'm adding the tire shredders a la GoldenEye. Not the laser ones, because that was too extreme. But the Goldfinger, tire shredders from the DB5. If I get the paint job for free, then I'm throwing in the tire shredders.
That's a little bit close to the... Because you could kill somebody with those. But, all right, fine.
It's meant to disable is the goal. It's not meant to kill. It's meant to disable the vehicle. But anyways, I'll take my paint job. I'll take it. Like I said, bright blue, bright royal blue, and the Union Jack on the roof. You know Bond's not afraid of it because, running away from Russian spies with a giant Union Jack parachute. I'm sure he'd drive around in a car with a Union Jack on the roof. It's got to be better than a Confederate flag, right?
Oh, yeah. So there you have it. Pimp My Prius on Her Majesty's Secret Podcast.
I'd be very interested to hear what our listeners out there would do to pimp their Prius. If they had a 2016 factory standard Toyota Prius and they got 7 options to pimp that Prius into a Bond car, I would like to hear what they would have to say. So you should totally throw us a comment on the website at hermajestiespod.com, or head on over to facebook.com/hermajestiespod. Tweet us at hermajestiespod. Email me, Eric at foureyeradio.com or Eric at hermajestiespod.com. Email or tweet Ziggy directly.
Yep, you can email me at ziggy@cinemaontherocks.com or tweet me at cinemaotr. You can also tweet the show at Her Majesty's Pod.
Yeah, we make ourselves very accessible. We definitely want to hear from you, and especially in this, we will definitely talk about or post up some of your guys' concoctions on these Bond cars. I would love to hear what you guys would do to a Prius to turn it into a Bond car.
Indeed. But that is going to do it for the Bond Cars episode of Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. We do hope that you have enjoyed the ride. Vroom, vroom, vroom.
Zoom. Oh, no Mazdas on the list whatsoever.
No Mazdas. Imagine that. But I'm Ziggy Berkeley.
And I'm Eric Dewey.
And you have been listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on The Fern.
This has been another great presentation by the 4-Eyed Radio Network. You can find more information at 4eyedradio.com.